The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, but also by the generous donations of you, the listener. Special thanks goes to Dean Clark, Alex McIntosh, James Richards, Tobias Whiting, Marcus Wheeler, Keith Erickson, Glenn Oberhauser, Robert Ruffner, and David Chakowzin. Guys, thank you so much for your generous support. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 179. Aurelian, Freejumper, so what's next? With hosts Neil Shuck Mike Hobbs, Mike Whitaker and Dave Luff, and special guest Sam Mustafa. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. I'm Neil Shuck, and as always, I am joined by the Welsh Wizard. And actually, he has a new job. He's now the official cat herder of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. It's Mr. Michael Hobbs. Hello, sir.
Hello, and greetings all.
How are you, mate? Scratched? Bitten?
Yeah. Scratched, bitten, and forever cats.
Welcome to the show, mate. How you doing? You all right?
I'm okay, yes.
Good stuff.
I'm very well.
Good stuff. And we also have the man who shall
Silverback.
be, who forever now will be known as
the Phantom Cake Snatcher.
He stole my cake!
And I'm sure during the show you'll be hearing an awful lot about Cakegate.
Because Neil will not let it rest.
It is, of course, Mr. Mike Whitaker. And as far as I heard, you're still eating it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the cake that
Very nice.
It's the cake that keeps on giving.
And you'll hear all about that story later on.
Indeed. Well, welcome one and all. How are you, Mr. Whitaker? Other than full of cake.
Mike Judas Whitaker.
No, knackered, full of cake, and somewhat hot, because, dear Lord, he's been pigging up these last few days.
Indeed, he has. Yeah, apparently due to some... It's all some American hurricane's fault, apparently, isn't it? Moving the jet stream or something like that.
It's also apparently absolutely hosing it down in the west of England. I've had photos and videos from friends on Facebook in the northwest with pub car parks that are 2 feet deep in water. So it's just, the weather is weird.
We've had some weather over the last 2 days.
Yeah.
None of it has been sunny.
Oh yeah, but you're in Wales. It always rains in Wales. It's just.
Believe me, I'll trade.
Yeah.
30 degrees on the central line on the circle line is not my idea of fun.
Ooh, no.
Ooh. Yeah.
But anyway, we've got a packed show and a half.
Yes, a packed programme tonight. Hello?
That didn't sound good.
No.
Is everybody still there?
Mike, are you still there?
Yeah.
It's all right.
I'm still there.
Dave?
Yeah.
Dave popped up again.
Yeah, Dave just popped on.
I'm here.
Oh, he's here!
Hallelujah!
He has appeared!
The gentle listener may note an edit point at this point. This is because Mr. Luff magically turned up. Hi, Dave.
Hello, chaps.
Welcome back, Dave.
Awful technical problems. I don't know what happened.
You're telling us you're an hour and a half late, mate.
I was early. I was on Skype before anyone. I just didn't know my Skype wouldn't connect to anyone.
Let's be honest. Dave is actually 2 months and an hour and a half late.
But we won't hold that against him.
No.
We missed you, mate.
Been busy. Oh, dear.
How are you, Pete?
Well, I updated Windows, and that had no effect. And obviously, you try to turn it off and turn it back on again. And I tried Skype, and that had no effect. And I unloaded Skype, and we're there now, though. I still don't know what happened.
But you're here. So,
Yeah.
well, Neil's going to finish telling us about what he's been doing, and then we're going to go cracking into what we've been up to. So,
All
back to
right.
Neil.
Right, okay. So now, with four of us on the podcast, for the main part of the podcast, we've actually got two conversations, not one, but two conversations with Sam Mustafa. He of Blucher fame and Grand Armée and Maurice and all those other great games. And now, pleased to say, friend of the show. And he came on, we had the opportunity to chat to him, both going back over what he'd been up to over the past, basically since we last had a chat to him. I'm looking forward to what's coming next. And then he actually wanted to have a chat to us as well about a subject that was bothering him. We also ended up having a discussion about that as well. Yeah, make sure you got loads of tea, guys. This could be a long one.
Or failing that, break out the next box of figures you need to paint.
Indeed. But make sure you don't eat cake.
I thought you were going to say break out the next box of beer you've got.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Well, there you go.
But
probably says more about us, Mick, than it does about anything else.
So, a quick break, and then we'll be back with what we've been up to. Seamless. This is seamless.
I must get through to Sergeant Watson's position. Jenkins, cover me. Whoa. Sergeant Watson, bring your men in. Withdraw.
It's all right, sir. We're enjoying ourselves.
What?
Yes, sir. It's these here chain of command rules, sir. We're having great fun.
Chain of command?
That's right, sir. It's a challenging but fun blend of command and control. It gives me the freedom I want to fight the way I want to. Never had so much fun, sir.
And we've cooked you some sausages.
Can't be helped, sir. Me and the lads are staying put.
Chain of command, World War II, platoon level rules from two fat laddies. They really put you in control. And they're even better than sausages.
what have we been playing? What have we been buying? We might even have painted something. The Meeples and Miniatures crew reveal all. Well, welcome back, and we still have Mr. Luff with us. So he's like he's lasted on the call 5 minutes, which is more than
which is more than the last 9 attempts put together. Hanging on by his digital fingernails, he is.
Indeed. Obviously the two mics, and so we're going to have a chat about what we've been up to over the last couple of weeks. So who wants to go first?
I think Mike should go first and tell us all about Herwood.
It depends. If you want to do them in chronological order, I should probably go last.
When is chronological order everybody does?
Oh, all right.
Depends any order what we did.
Yeah.
I submit that the honourable second member for Leicester does indeed have a point. So, what have we been up to? Let's see. Played some Sales of Glory.
Mm-hmm.
Bought some more Sales of Glory.
More?
There was a big collection up on eBay, and our club treasurer decided that it was too good to miss. So he bought it and has been splitting up the largesse amongst those who were interested. So we introduced another member, basically parted with about 65 quid and got himself a starter set and a mat and stuff. Cole himself nabbed a few. I got a couple of sloops in the USS Constitution, which I've been trying to get hold of for ages, and a couple more Spanish ships, which is making the club campaign next year look much fun. We're looking at a sort of Caribbean, Napoleonic era Caribbean campaign, with certainly at least the French, the Spanish, the British, the Americans, and a few odd ships repainted as pirates. A sort of map-based, slightly narrative campaign with a few RPG elements, which should be fun.
Ooh.
Other than that, trying to remember what on earth I played the day after the show.
You had a game with Flintlock.
That's right!
Sharp Practice.
Nick, who is your partner in crime in turning Flintlock and Slaughterloo into a Sharp Practice 2 variant.
Yeah.
We had an absolutely fantastic game of Sharp Practice 2 with a horde of dogs and a horde of frogs in Russian and French uniforms.
The frogs are the Toderini, so they're sort of Italian, shall we say.
All right, okay. I was sufficiently wide from the show at that point. I was just moving frogs and killing things, and it was a barrel of laughs, and it actually does go on to prove that Sharp Practice 2 is actually a beautifully simple game system to pick up. Because I was far too brain dead to remember anything Richard taught me in the last couple of times that we've played it. And I was happily slaughtering dogs by about turn 2 with gay abandon.
Please note that no dogs were actually harmed in the war game.
I did, however, find an interesting exploit in some of the rules, which I believe Nick has gone away and changed.
Well, you can't change Sharp Practice 2. That's heresy.
He's got some variants for bits of that particular force where there is deliberate factionalization within the forces, and you have to argue over who gets the command chits when they turn up.
Yeah.
And one of the two halves of the faction, one of the two factions, has an alternative method of getting command chits, most accurately summarized as, "You drop dead, I'll have a command chit now."
Remember, this is Flintlock.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So I think we established that was possibly a little too easy for that half of the faction to generate command chits and do. I was getting multiple turns with the three group formation with musketry most of the way through the latter half of the game. So I think we've nerfed that a little in the interests of a game balance, but it was great fun. And I think if you are coming to Hammerhead next year, it will be the game the club are bringing as their participation game, so you can try it out. You heard it here first. What else did I do? Oh yeah, there was a war game show. Nah, nothing much really.
Tell us about Harewood then, because I couldn't make it, unfortunately.
I was there.
Murph was there.
Yeah.
Merv was there, and Merv's cake was there.
Yeah.
I'm given to understand that was the case, yes. Moving swiftly on.
I was given to understand that was the case.
All right. Shall we clarify this? Merv found me and did not find you because you had your nose in a game of Sharp Practice, and gave me a nicely foil-wrapped sample of his wife's excellent baking.
Sample? It was a big sample. It was a cake. It was a whole cake.
It was as big as the one you got last year. You would have found it very familiar, I believe.
Right. Lemon drizzle.
As you may recall,
with coconut bits.
I found you at the Sharp Practice game, and I said, I'm going to stick this behind reception because I don't want to carry it around for the rest of the day.
No,
Come see me before the end of the show, and we'll sort it out.
All I heard was, come see me before the end of the show, we'll sort it out.
And I did say I was putting it behind reception.
I didn't hear that bit.
I should note that I actually have a text from Neil, which I can read you, if you like, at the end of the show, basically saying, I've looked for you, I can't find you, I'm going now.
You and AWOL!
I was upstairs photographing the Saga tournament prize giving. You know, I don't just hang around at that con and show and do nothing. And Neil basically said, sorry, tried to find you to say bye, but when round chosen you weren't around. We'll catch up in the week. Does that sound to you like the text of a man who's concerned about his lemon drizzle cake? I ask you.
Well, the jury's out.
Sorry, I was way down by the beer.
I should point out that I got home and I took the show box out of the car, removed the top layer from it, and went, oh, bother. As I saw a foil wrapped piece of lemon drizzle cake and went, I forgot to give half of that to Neil.
Dave, he's done us out of cake, mate. I'd have brought it back. We could have shared it last week. You missed cake, Dave.
I think it's got to be down to you, Neil. It's your fault.
I feel the need to say that for all that it wasn't deliberate poetic justice, since we should remind listeners what happened to last year's cake. What happened to last year's cake, Neil?
It was very nice.
Got eaten.
What happened to it, Neil?
What do you do with cake? You eat it before it goes off.
When did you get the cake, Neil?
I can't remember. It was sometime. It was. Was it sometime during the interview?
It was at the show.
It was at the show. Yes.
It was not intended just for you, any more than this piece was.
Yeah, but you didn't. Yeah, but he didn't tell me that. And what he did for me previous to that was intended for me, because it was my birthday.
Right.
See? So actually, it's all Mervin's fault.
Hobbsy, the next piece is yours, I think, provided you actually turn up to the show.
Okay. So,
what a piece of cake caused so much trouble.
Oh, I know.
So, apart from that, it was actually a very good show from a people who ran it point of view. Apart from an unfortunate incident with the free gifts from Gripping Beast.
Yes.
Thank you so much, UPS. Basically, it was a little bit more last minute than we would have liked, and I know that Lord S has been having a few issues that made it a little bit difficult for him to get things sorted for us. So they went on to us via UPS. I think they were scheduled to leave Beast Towers on the Wednesday night. So on the Thursday, I noticed that they were arriving on the Friday, thought, I might not be in. Let's get these sensibly redirected somewhere where I can pick them up. Somewhere in that process, UPS lost them. As in lost. As in, we have no idea where they are. Our tracking information has no idea where they are. They apparently left the Northampton depot on a truck, and that's the last we saw of them.
Okay.
And we don't work Saturdays, so we're really, really sorry. But your next chance of seeing your 250 free gifts from your sponsor for your show on Sunday is Monday. I am told from people who are listening to my end of the call that my mother would have been very proud of the I am very disappointed in you tone. I was less than amused, shall we say. Anyway.
So at that point, all I hear is Gary Oldman going, I am starting to get very disappointed.
It didn't quite get that bad, but it was close. Accompanied by the fact that on Monday morning, I got phoned by someone from the depot to attempt to help me track down my parcel, who came in on a number with no caller ID, which immediately causes me to let it go to voicemail, and did not leave me a number I could contact them back on. Nice one, guys. We did eventually find them. As far as I can gather, UPS found them the following Wednesday, which is a week ago as we were recording this, and they turned up the following day with a little help from Harold Hardrudder himself.
I'm sorry?
You may have to explain that one.
Yes. So I, needless to say, had posted a couple of things on the show website and retweeted them as me. And the guy who is one of the people who is taking part, I believe, unofficially in English Heritage Retweet the 1066 campaign is playing Harold Hardrudder.
Ah.
And he proceeded to chip in. So we had a delightful little exchange in which he vented his disapproval of the gross dishonour that was being done on him by UPS. And sadly, I can report that the UPS Help Twitter account has no sense of humour whatsoever because they wouldn't play at all. Absolute silence. They wouldn't play the game, which was really disappointing because I think they might have come out of it in a slightly better light if they'd done so.
Mm.
But anyway, they are here now. So, for the benefit of anybody who is listening to the podcast who went to the show and is disappointed because they didn't get one of Gripping Beast's really rather nice Harold Hardrada Viking hero figures, if you're in the vicinity of Peterborough, feel free to pop into the club on a Monday night and we will give you one. If you see Ruben and PE2 Collectibles at any trade show, any wargame show in the next few months, he's got the box in the van. And if you go and tell him you were at the show and manage to sound reasonably convincing about it, he will let you have a figure. Unfortunately, that's the best we can do because mailing the whole lot out will be a little bit prohibitively expensive.
And you never know; it could all just start again.
Yeah, and so I'd like once again to really, really apologise for the fact that your free gifts for those of you who came to the show didn't turn up, but entirely outside our control, we did our best. That aside, we seem to have had lots of favourable comment. Once again, if you've been to the show, do pop along to the show website where there is a feedback form if you want to tell us what you thought. My worst fear didn't materialise, which is that Ruben and I spent most of the week before redrawing the floor plan about 87 times with me going, I'm sorry, you have to leave at least 5'6" and preferably 6 foot between tables. And Ruben saying, can't we fit another trader in? But from the fact that several people commented on the fact that it was quite easy to move between the tables, we seem to have succeeded on that score, although I think we have pretty much hit the limit for that venue.
I was going to say, I think getting any more in there will probably start to prove to be, a little tight.
There's room for one more. Next, there's a spot where we stored 3 sack barrows next to the catering window where we could squeeze another 6 foot trade stand in. But that is pretty much it. There were some absolutely fantastic games. We had the guys from Harrogate with that beautiful Retreat for 1812 Sharp Practice 2 game.
Mm.
The Southend guys bought the Battle of Benfleet, which you may have seen at Salute a couple of years ago.
That was good.
Which was rather pretty. We had a slightly cut down version of the very British Civil War Canal Commandos game, which was also super. I mean, the detail in that, the scenery, that urban setting there is lovely. We had a lot of different things. John Austin, who's ex of our club and he's a Mantic Pathfinder, he's a Tour Games, whatever there it is, he's heaven knows what else. He's basically a walking evangelist for small-scale skirmish games. Basically booked 18 foot of table and showed off a whole bunch of games for the various manufacturers who were around. We had Posh Games, who are our local board games club, who I think you would have noticed, Neil, as they had Memoir 44 and one of the Command and Colours variants out most of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I assume you saw them.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yes, I thought you might have done.
they were playing Ancients. Since
They were.
Yeah. You also had somebody doing Heroes of Normandy and Shadows of the Normandy.
We did. Yes, we did. So we tried to try and sort of curate it a bit, so that it wasn't all big showy demo games, and there was some nice small skirmishy things that people could dip into. And I think on the whole it worked. We had a lovely bunch of traders, even if Foundry did have a bit of a mishap on their way up. But they made it in the end, and by all accounts they immediately vanished under a tide of about 600 or 700 quid's worth of show pre-orders.
Oh, right, okay.
Everybody seemed... we had Warlord, we had Mantic, which was quite surprising, who also seemed to have a good day. And all in all, I think we had a good show. Although I'll bow to the opinions of those people who weren't slightly biased by having run it.
I enjoyed it.
That's you, Neil. Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It was actually nice to primarily go to a show as a punter for a change. I wasn't officially kind of working the show for doing a show report for the magazine or for a magazine, which is what I seem to have spent the last 5 years doing an awful lot of. So it was nice to go and do at least half the show as a punter. And enjoyed it. It was good. It was noticeably a lot bigger than last year.
Yeah,
but,
we basically, for those of you who went last year and didn't go this year, the smaller area that had Simon Miller and James Morris's big game in it actually expands to about twice that size. So we'd taken that as well. And we also moved all the tournaments upstairs, which really helped.
It was good.
How was your game of sharp practice?
Oh, excellent. Oh, I suppose it's an opportune moment to switch over to what I've been up to. I suppose at this point.
Oh,
yes.
we should before you do that, we should briefly flag the winner of our Steve Frisbee Memorial Trophy, which was friend of the show, as in nice man who makes dice bags, Matt Slade,
and
Ralph Plowman for their absolutely brilliantly warped sharp practice game set at the beginning, in fact, at the climax of the first Test match on Mars.
Indeed, on the eve of the Queen's coronation.
Indeed.
Jubilee.
Jubilee, waiting to see if PG Grace was going to make his 100.
Yes. We should again go to show that, it is amazing what you can do with sharp practice.
Yes. How can you not like a game where you can poke... I just basically wandered around every half an hour ago and went, what's the score, guys?
Indeed. So, played a game of sharp practice. If you've been following the Lardies blog, on their brand spanking new website, don't you know? New website they have, but yes, they were...
You shop as well.
They were doing a sharp practice game called Viva Ras Vegas. Ras Vegas being a pirate cum bandit in roughly kind of mid-19th century. And we were playing a group of sailors and British Marines who were attempting to rescue a damsel in distress from the dastardly clutches of Ras Vegas and his band of brigands and ne'er-do-wells and awfully bad chaps. It was great fun. I said it once, I'll say it again. Everybody who is a Lardies fan should get the opportunity to get involved in a game with rich umpiring at least once. You owe it to yourself.
Absolutely.
You owe it to yourself. It was more innuendos than the average carry-on film.
Yes, the screens.
Was a stick of truth there?
Not this time.
It's not a proper Lardy game without the stick of truth.
You didn't even have the toffee hammer either.
Suffice it to say that it was a game in true Lardy in true Lardy fashion. Next appearing, I believe, at Derby. So if you're going to Derby, then you'll have the opportunity to play Viva Ras Vegas. Or should I say Viva Ras Vegas?
Ras Vegas.
And yes, if you were around the show, you'd have heard that every time his card came out. Because there was at least 3 of us who just really got into it.
Yes.
Very silly.
It's also worth noting, if you are a member of a club within reasonable spitting distance of snubbins, that Rich will quite happily come and demo the game at your club.
So yeah,
and if he's not free, I will. If you're really unlucky, I'll bring Nick and the flintlock stuff as well.
So yeah, there was it was a really good show. Had a nice buzz about it. How many people did you get to the door in the end?
If you count tournament players, we just tickled 400.
That's good.
That's good. Yeah.
If you add the traders and the people running games of that, we were probably on the 500. But of course, they don't pay to get in, and they're not necessarily useful numbers from a point of view of counting trade footprint, which is what's important to the traders, is how many people they've got who are actually going to have time to be parting from their money.
Yes, but yeah, 400 for the second year of a show. That's quite decent.
Yeah. And please don't take that last remark in any cynical way. We are very, very conscious of the fact that you can't do a show like this without traders. It's important for the traders that they get a good footfall. It's important for us that we give the punters a range that isn't just 18 versions of Box Shifting Flames of War and Games Workshop. And it's also very important to us that the traders, in general, leave happy and richer than they arrived. And with that in mind, we will always seek to, it's nice to get that kind of footfall through the door, because it means that the odds are the traders are going to be leaving happy, because they'll have something that will please, enough some things that will please someone in what we hope is a reasonably well curated selection of things available. I mean, I think we did quite all right from the point of view of just the wide range of trade available. I know, to single one out, the chap from Original Laser Design,
Yes.
right next to where you were playing, had a brilliant show.
Nice chap.
Thoroughly nice chap. We should get him on the show.
Indeed. We will indeed be reviewing some of his stuff.
Because it's well nice, isn't it?
It is. Including he does a very nice MDF Viking ship, actually.
A fully, completely made, pretty much walk away with it in a beer carrier.
If you want, yeah. If you wanted it, yes.
And I know for a fact that he shifted a lot of those because Russell from the Rushton Club. I think it's Russell. I'm probably blanked his name. Anyway, the guy from the Rushton Club basically went away with a couple with a intention of placing a bulk club order for various nefarious plans they had. And I know other people were walking away clutching ships and Saxon long hauls and churches. And I got the impression that he certainly went away happy as a trader.
Cool, good stuff. So that was Herod. Now, I've been busy in travelling around lots of shows, because like 2 weeks before we did Partisan, then we did Herod, and the week in between was Strategy.com, which was this new show that was being put on by, if you believe the publicity, the guys who really know how to do game shows, because they do things like Comic-Con and stuff. So they know how to do shows. So we had Strategy.com.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as Telford Tumbleweed.
That doesn't bode well.
Put it this way, I think they might have been pleased to have the numbers for Hereward through the door at any point.
The Specials turned up, didn't they? They were the band.
Yeah, yes, indeed. It really was. I was going to enter into the Saga Iron Man tournaments because there was going to be an Iron Man tournament running on the Saturday. Which is something I think we talked about the first one in the last news section that happened at War Games Illustrated HQ, and they were going to be running another one, and then that got cancelled the week before the show. I'm thinking, strange, because that was being run by Battlefield Hobbies, the new guys in Daventry just down the road. I'd since discovered that Battlefield Hobbies pulled out the week before the show because they'd been talking to the show organisers and found out how many advance tickets they'd sold, or more to the point, how many advance tickets they hadn't sold. So Battlefield Hobbies pulled out the week before, which meant that all the miniature tournament stuff, they were meant to be doing Saga, they were meant to be doing Bolt Action, Beyond the Gates of Antares, and a couple of other bits and pieces, all went. Okay? That all disappeared. I actually wasn't going to go. I was sort of fully prepared to turn around and go, you know what, I'm just not going to bother. And then it turns out that one thing they were doing at the show was the National Vanguard Finals. Vanguard is one of these CCG things. Yeah. I don't take an awful lot of notice about it myself, but Josh plays it. I mentioned it to him a few weeks beforehand that, they got a Vanguard tournament on at this show, and he kind of went, oh, can we go? I'd love to go to that. Okay, fine. So in the end, we went because Josh wanted to go into this Vanguard tournament. And to be fair, the Vanguard tournament was really well attended. They had over well over 200 people. Okay, for a CCG tournament, which took up one hall. Okay, so that was all booked into a hall. They had their own trade stand, simply catering for that CCG, and basically that's where they stayed all day. Okay, in a completely separate bit of the convention centre. In the meantime, I walk into where it's all happening, and there were 7 traders, 2 of which were selling games. Sorry, 3 of which were selling games.
Okay. And the other 4?
Okay, so basically you had 2 or 3. You had 3 box shifters, all board gamers, board games or card games. there was somebody selling T-shirts and things like cosplay ears and that sort of stuff. You know, that sort of thing. There's a guy selling jewellery. There's a guy selling custom deck boxes, wooden ones. Very nice, very pretty. And then there was a company who were doing, again, all sorts of other wooden kind of, you know, gamery stuff, dice towers and various other bits and pieces. There was the questing nights. Telford questing nights were demoing some board games, so they were demoing X-Wing, tanks, and a couple of others whose names escape me. But primarily it was X-Wing and tanks. And then they had a bunch of game demonstrators from Advesium who were there demonstrating board games, and that's who I ended up spending most of the day with, because, you know, and there was like three food vendors.
So busy,
was it?
Wow.
If Advesium demonstrated to more than a dozen people in the day, I would be surprised.
It must have been bad, because you sent me a text at 12 o'clock going, I'm in a wargame show, or I'm at a gamer show, and I'm bored.
You know what? At lunchtime, I left the show, went and sat in the car and listened to the cricket. There was a one-day international on that day.
There was, yes.
And I ended up walking out the show and spent an hour sitting in the car listening to the cricket, because I was bored. It was horrible. I have never, ever known a show like it. Never, ever seen it. In all my years of going to game shows, I've never seen anything like that. Yeah, they had things out for RPG sessions, in the same way that UK Games Expo did, which you have to pay extra for. And they had, like, you know, other bits of gaming, but you had to pay extra for it. I mean, it was £10 to get in the venue, and I felt like going and asking for my money back. By the end of the day, there was a few people in there playing games and what have you, but it was desperate. I have never seen anything like it.
You have, I should point out, just described the Hereward Committee's nightmare.
Go and have a look. I did a show report, which is on the website. Go and have a look at some of the pictures, especially these things like I took a couple of pictures around about lunchtime. If nothing else, there are 3 food vendors in the main hall, okay, at lunchtime at a gaming convention, okay. If they sold half a dozen lunches, that's about all they did. Admittedly, the prices weren't cheap. But even so, when you walk up to the main food vendor at lunchtime, there's no one sat eating. There's about 2 people sat eating meals, and there is no queue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you know is bad.
Yeah. Now, why? As far as I know, the main problem is apparently they just didn't tell anybody about it. They started their publicity way, way, way too late. It sounds like they didn't really start getting their publicity sorted till 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. Yeah, that is my understanding from hearing about people. Everybody said nobody knows about it. All these people who are demonstrators, you know, know lots of people in the board game community, and nobody knew about it. I would have hated to be one of the traders there, because they were open for 3 days. And yeah, originally it was meant to be 4. They cut it down to 3, so it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I would be very, very surprised.
I thought it was a 1-day show.
No, it's a 3-day show. I mean, the venue's brilliant. It's a really good venue.
Airy, was it? Lots of space to move around?
Yeah, just a bit. Yeah, but
have you seen the pictures, Hobbsy?
Yeah.
I mean, venue-wise, it's Telford International Convention Centre. It is a smashing venue, really impressive. Nobody came. Nobody came. It was such a shame. So, as I was about to say, if any vendor came away from there, even breaking even, I would be very surprised. Maybe a couple of the card sellers. Because, as I said, the Vanguard tournament was packed, and Josh had a good time, but they had no reason to go anywhere else other than the hall they were in, because everything that they needed was catered for there. There you go.
Yeah.
For a start.
Oh, dear.
So, yeah, disaster. and little short of, unfortunately. Be very surprised if you see it again, but you never know. Other than that, what have I been doing? Mr. Luff's been very quiet. That's because I've been talking. We've been trying to play games with Mr. Luff.
Didn't very much, have I? That's to be fair. I've been too busy trying to get my business up and running.
Yeah, well, we got one really interesting thing to catch up with you about in a minute, mate. Which I know, but
there's been a distinct lack of gaming in my life.
Distinct lack of gaming, and the one game we did try was we touched on it last time, which was it Poseidon's Warriors, wasn't it, Dave?
Yeah,
you loved that, didn't you?
Yeah, it was everything I hated in a game. Unfortunately,
yeah, it wasn't.
It's the one thing I hate, which is micro movement management. It's probably the biggest thing that's the biggest turn off for any game for me. Can't stand it. Hate it.
Yeah. In what sense?
I can't be bothered with just.
I mean, how micro? What are you actually meaning by micro movement management at this point?
Well, the fact that if you've like moved it like an extra couple of mil, it actually makes a difference, or you've not quite got the angle right, and it's like, I don't know. Well, that's how I took it. What about you, Neil?
I mean, I know what you mean. Measurement had to be precise, and certainly there was an issue with the fact that because I'd used ships in a particular way, because I got these top-down, basically paper ship models, I should have modelled them with a prow on the front, but rather than just like a flat front base. Because actually at one point it actually made a difference with the fact that if those models had been modelled with a prow, a ram would have been missed because the prows would have missed each other, as opposed to the fact that they actually hit because the two bases hit each other. That sort of thing. So it does that kind of mattered. I think the thing that broke it for both of us was the fact that we got within ramming range. Okay. And it basically boiled down to whoever won initiative got their ram in first. I diced, got initiative, got to move the first squadron, got a ram in, and when I got the ram in, one thing I did was I sunk one of the ships in the middle of Dave's squadron. Immediately what happened then was that because his squadron then ceased to be in squad cohesion, in cohesion, because one of the ships had been sunk in the middle. Because everyone's meant to be within 2 inches. And because I'd taken out a ship in the middle, it meant that the ship on the end was no longer in squadron cohesion. In the rules, as soon as you go out of squad cohesion, you're no longer allowed to attack. Your primary responsibility immediately becomes you have to get back into unit cohesion. Okay? However, the thing was, he's doing that while there is a quadreme less than an inch away from him, which he can ram.
Which I've been, like, charging in formation towards for the last 2 turns.
Yes. And then all of a sudden, just because they lose a ship, all of a sudden the primary concern becomes, oh no, we can't attack him anymore because we're out of formation. And we kind of looked at each other. It's not very often we look at each other during a game and go,
really?
yeah. And it really is, what the f*** are we going on here? And it really was one of those. We looked at each other and was like, are you sure you got that right? Yeah, that's what he says. Look at this. Oh, okay. Not good. I'm actually at the point where I'm meant to be writing a review for it, and I'm really struggling to write the review. Simply because it's bad. Now, again, I mean, interestingly, reading the introduction to the book, they kind of say, well, Ancient War Galleys is one of the hardest, because of this whole thing of ram or be rammed, tactically, it's potentially one of the hardest things to game. But we were really struggling to see where the game and where the fun was, personally. Now, whether it's just one of these things that we just don't get it, and that's maybe the issue, we just didn't get it. I don't know. So that was that. So that kind of put Dave off gaming for a couple of weeks.
I don't think it was, but there you go.
The other thing I did, and here's Dave kind of going, "Oh, I hate micromanagement. and all this sort of thing. Right. I went to Battlefield Hobbies last weekend and went to something called a boot camp. Ooh, what's a boot camp? Right, now, one of the guys who is one of the owners of Battlefield Hobbies is a guy called James Hamilton. Okay? Simon Hall, you may know the name, he was one of the authors of Field of Glory for Mossbury, yeah? He's just written a new set of Ancients rules called Mortem et Gloriam, Death or Glory.
Mm-hmm.
Just been released. Mr. Hamilton was running what he called a boot camp last Sunday. It was basically an introduction to the game. Come along in the morning, we'll explain all the rules, and in the afternoon we'll get to play a game. And I had a couple of email conversations with Simon, and it's like, well, if I want to know about the game and have an informed conversation about the game, I might as well go along. Dave will tell you, from experience,
Will I?
how much I like DBM.
Well, about as much as I do.
And probably me. And
So, obviously, on the one hand, I was feeling, shall we say, concerned, skeptical. Okay, let's see. Apprehensive, yeah, kind of going. Okay, yeah, because it's that style of Ancients game. It's all, and the units are made up in the same way.
It's elements and line of battle, basically.
Yeah, well, yeah, where the units are made up of multiple individual elements.
Yeah.
And there is...
I should point out that for all you don't like DBM, you do like Sword and Shield, you do like Two of the Strongest, and both of those are the same.
To a certain greater or lesser extent.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got nothing against single-based unit games. It's the mechanisms behind those games which are important.
And this is, and remember, this is DBM, so it's not a single base unit. It's multiple base removals and fighting in ranks and files and all that sort of thing. And especially with DBA and DBM, requiring a protractor. I'm going to get so much hate mail. But you know what I mean? Very fiddly movement, that sort of thing.
Micromanagement.
Right. I thought, okay, let's see what I've let myself in for. So colour me surprised when we end up with describing a system with command and control that works on card activation, and it's alternate unit activation, which is a bit different from what we've come across before with I go, you go, that style of game.
It's a bit Sword and Shieldy, and it's also potentially a bit Ultra Freedomy as well.
It works really well. I was really impressed with the command and control system. There is definitely the potential that you can't do as much with your army as you want to, and then it has custom combat dice in 5 different colours: black, white, green, yellow, and red. And as they go up in colour, they get better. They get different combat symbols on them. So basically, what you end up doing is, rather than going through all these plus and negative combat factors, and then having to work all that out in maths, you basically go through adding up your combat factors, come up with a number. Your opponent comes up with a number. There's no negatives; it's just positives. You come up with a number. Your opponent comes up with a number. If they're the same number, you're both rolling green dice, and then if the numbers start differing, the dice colours change. And so that's how the combat modifiers work. So when you end up fighting each other, you're just rolling different coloured dice.
Interestingly different.
And it's really nice. It's really clever. And I never thought now, yes, there's still an amount of fiddly combat movement in it, but it's a little bit more forgiving. It's a little bit more forgiving than DBM, and of course, in these things, there is a certain thing of it depends who you play. Yeah, you know what? I never thought I'd say this about a game from the DBM FOG family, but I actually really enjoyed it. It's got possibilities, certainly got possibilities. So that's what I've been doing.
Right, let's get him on the show.
He's just finishing a move to South Africa. But once he's finished his move and settled in, we'll get him on the show, all right? Other than that, I've bought some more Guild Ball figures because I'm painting Guild Ball figures along with Josh to play Guild Ball, and I've been painting some Planet 4 stuff for Sci-Fi Spot and Games Planet 4 stuff. And I realise I've talked for an awful long time, so I'll shut up.
What about you then, Dave?
Me? Unfortunately, like I said earlier, I've not done much in the hobby at all. Terrible, really.
Yeah, but
Sacrilege.
Yeah, but potentially you've had the most interesting time of all of us, mate. Haven't you?
Have I?
Yeah, because
Have you?
what have you been doing?
I don't know. What have I been doing?
Oh, flipping it. Isn't it really bad when you have to prompt people into saying what you've been doing? You went to Manchester, didn't you?
Oh, I did. I did go to Manchester, yes. What did I do?
What did you do in Manchester,
What did I do?
Dave?
Well, I visited my grandfather, who is now in his 93rd year. He's had quite an eventful life. And he was in the Navy in the Second World War. He was in Special Forces, basically, a group called Combined Operations, I think. I can't remember now.
Operations Directive.
I'm a bit tired at the moment. It was Lord Louis Mountbatten's lot, anyway. It was his lot. He started writing his memoirs, and he's got to 1938. So I went up with a recorder and got about 3.5 hours worth down, and there's still more to do. We only just got to the invasion of Greece, basically.
Oh, fantastic!
He was all round the med. He was, and he's got some interesting anecdotes and bits and bobs, and sort of like the history that we've actually read about and characters that we've actually read about in history, and like they passed my grandfather's path at one point or another during the war, which is quite interesting.
Mountbatten's responsible for such entertainment, if you can call it such, as the raid on Saint Nazaire and Dieppe.
Yeah.
So,
oh.
You were right. Combined operations.
He was a coxswain anyway. He was a coxswain. He was one of the. I think at the time he got to be one of the youngest petty officers in the Navy. He was a coxswain on a landing craft. So he was involved in dropping commandos on the beach and all sorts of bits and bobs. He was on all sorts. He was on landing craft Mark 1s, Mark 3s. He worked on landing craft assaults. He was actually in all sorts. He was on some of the bigger landing craft at times.
This sounds like one for pen and sword when it's finished.
Yeah. Well, he could carry 100 troops in his landing craft, where the landing craft assault were only small, a lot smaller. They were. He was telling me, but one of the most interesting things he told me, which I never realised, and I think it came as a bit of a shock to you, didn't it, Neil? When I told you that he landed in Sicily. And he went out to the bigger ships, grabbed the troops, took them ashore for the beach landings, and then he had to move further up the coast. And they just leapfrogged over several days up the coast under their own power in these landing craft, just beaching it in the evening and just bedding down on the beach basically. And then after that, where they got to where they were going for, because I haven't got the information in front of me, he actually. About 100 landing craft, apparently, he said, all got together, and they went under their own power from Sicily to Malta, under their own power.
That's
yeah,
that's a trek and a half, isn't it?
Yeah, in landing craft, and he said if the Luftwaffe had any planes up, he said we were going to be in big trouble, but he says we got away with it. Yeah.
So what are you going to do with the recording?
Well, the idea is to get some of it down and get it and sort of help him with his memoirs, basically.
Mm.
That's the general idea.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he did tell a story about, because I said, well, we're going to talk about how you ended up getting back, after basically being demobbed, and he says, oh, interesting story there. He says I went back on the same ship that I went out on. When he went out to the Med, when the war basically started for him, and then after that, he had quite an interesting life after the war as well, because he basically came back. He was a lad from Dagenham, and he came back and found out there wasn't much left of Dagenham, as he told me, and said, "Need to move on," because obviously Dagenham had, been heavily bombed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome.
That sounds like something we should get on the show. Have to see if we can find out a story extract or something from you, Dave.
That'll be cool.
A story extract. Wow, crikey. Yeah. Might be able to do that. So, I mean, apart from that, well, I haven't really done anything, have I? I mean, you've come round on the regular Wednesday night, and I've been absolutely exhausted. So we've just talked about gaming and what's going on, haven't we?
We have.
Which
I
obviously
assume that's Thursday, not Wednesday.
Yeah, Thursday. It used to be Wednesday.
See, you are tired.
Yeah, it used to be Wednesday back in the day, didn't it, Neil?
It did.
Changed to Thursdays. But obviously some of the stuff, you've already alluded to tonight. So, yeah.
But hopefully we'll get a bit more gaming in now, maybe. Now your business is all up and running.
Well, yeah, it seems sort of settling a bit more into itself. I've just got to settle into it now.
Yeah. Yeah, the trouble is now he does one-to-one painting for a living. He gets fed up with painting wood.
Yeah, one-to-one. Yeah. So
that remains Mr. Hobbs.
Yeah, I don't know how I can follow that. Mine's going to be really short compared to you lot. I haven't done any proper wargaming for about 6 weeks. Probably since last time I played a game was when I went to Blood Island back in August. I've been doing lots of board gaming though. I started going over to see my mate Mark, who lives on the corner, about 30 minutes away from me, on a Tuesday, and we tend to have a little game or something. Usually, Command and Colours is what we've been doing over the last month or so. I mean, we've covered all of them. So we've done Napoleonic, we've done the Ancients, we've done Battle Law, and yesterday we played the Great War with another mate of ours, Phil. So really, really enjoying those 4 systems. Great fun. And there's also a little gang of us who meet up sort of once a month in Firestorm on a Sunday. And we used to sort of play big games. We do like an all-day game. But again, recently we've just been doing board games. So we've done Firefly. Last time we met up, we did Scythe.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which I've got to say, yeah, a really good game. I had no idea what I was doing for the first 2 hours. Literally had no idea. I couldn't see what the game was, didn't know what to do, and then it just clicked, and really, really enjoyed that. So, yeah, so that's what we've been doing sort of gaming-wise. I've been doing a bit of painting, but not much. I haven't bought much either. The only thing I really bought is some Westphalian miniatures, which I took me about.
And how many bits of Battle Law stuff?
Oh, well, that doesn't really count. I mean,
it's a board game.
How many bits of Battle Law stuff?
It's a board game. It doesn't count.
I bought a couple of the expansions to have a look at. So I bought the Undead expansion.
For research purposes, of course. Yes.
Research purposes.
And what's the title of this podcast again?
Meeples and Miniatures. Yes. So, yeah, I bought some Battle Law expansion.
Prosecution Res case.
Yes. And, a few of those. So I've done a few unboxing review-y type things on my blog. They look good. Hoping to try the Undead out soon. Yeah, I got some Westphalian miniatures. They're on their way because they sort of lost the parcel and then found out they hadn't sent it. So they chucked me in a few extras and they posted it to me.
Right.
But some good news, everybody. I'm doing a bit of play testing for a Chain of Command variant called General Bonaparte meets Chain of Command. Which is a battalion level Napoleonic game written by the guy who wrote La Flou Sacra.
AKA GB Cock.
Yeah. And they're basically using some of the core mechanics from Chain of Command and are put together a very nice looking battalion level Napoleonic game. So I've got the rules for that. I'm going to hopefully get them on the table in the next week or so.
Ooh.
So I'm not sure how much I can say because obviously he's play testing. But I think there's a few battle reports out there. I think it's fairly open play testing. So yeah, that looks quite interesting, and it gives me another excuse to use my old Napoleon War figures. because it's just perfect for that. So
As if you needed one.
As if I needed one, yeah. So that's really all I've been up to.
Cool. Well, no, that's what we've been up to. Okay, so we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll have the hobby news. Announcements, new releases, Kickstarters. What's caught our eye? It's time to catch up with the Meeples and Miniatures hobby news. Welcome to the news. Go, Mr. Whitaker.
Friends of the show, well, friends of me anyway. Phalanx Consortium.
Yeah, because you met them.
I've met Chris. I've met Chris. Yeah, Chris from Phalanx Consortium, who are the people doing the really nice Kickstarter for the scenery for Polyversal. I remembered. Just ought to flag for those of you who are still wavering. It's past its major funding goal. It has 7 days to go as of recording, which probably means it'll have about 0.33 minutes to go by the time we get this monster edited.
Okay, so it's finishing around about the 21st of September, yeah?
It is finishing on Thursday, the 22nd of September.
Right.
At 2 p.m. BST for some strange reason. Heaven only knows why.
Because they're over in the Pacific?
But yes, in that case, it's still first thing in the morning on a Thursday in the US. But anyway, closing at 2 p.m. BST next Thursday, the 22nd, by the time you're hearing this. So 7 and a bit days to go. And I think we mentioned it before.
We have.
If you want good-looking, big, chunky 6-10mm wargame scenery for your sci-fi games, this is the place to go.
Excellent. I've got a quick one.
Go on.
Right, Warlord Games. They've got their pike and shot rules.
Mm-hmm.
They have released a free download of a samurai army list using pike and shot.
Really?
And, yeah.
Ooh.
Tim Green has written it.
All right, who's the samurai fan around here?
That'd be me.
I think it's the one who's going ooh all the time.
You think?
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're interested in that and you've got pike and shot, you know the rules, go on to the Warlord site and download the free PDF. It looks interesting.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Yes.
Mm.
I've missed that one.
Come back, Neil. Come back.
Yes, stay on target. Yes, indeed.
Neil's in his happy place.
If you remember, I think it was the last show, or maybe the one before, when we were talking about what came out of Gen Con, and we were talking about the interesting development with the fact that Fantasy Flight Games were looking at doing a miniatures game based on their Rune Wars universe. Which is, funny enough, it's the same universe that the Battle Lore that Mr. Hobbs is currently playing takes place in.
Indeed, it is.
Indeed. Yes. And I thought we mused at the time, we wondered how that would affect their current relationship with a certain Games Workshop.
And we have our answer.
Indeed.
Quite dramatically, some would say.
Quite a bit.
Yes, as it was announced, was it start of this week or back end of last week? I think it was actually start of this week.
Yeah, start of this week.
Start of this week that the contract between Fantasy Flight and Games Workshop is coming to an end. As of, is it February 2017 or is it sooner than that even?
I can't remember the date, but it's soon.
It's soon. It's certainly within the next 6 months.
Beginning, and I quote, since I've just done a very rapid Google, which seems to be my job on this show.
Go on then.
Beginning February the 28th, 2017, Fantasy Flight Games will no longer offer for sale any games in conjunction with Games Workshop, including Talisman and all games taking place in the Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k universes.
Indeed. So that has implications for things like... yes.
Do you want the list?
Go on.
Black Crusade, Blood Bowl Team Manager, Chaos in the Old World, Chaos Marauders, Dark Heresy and 2nd Edition, Deathwatch, Forbidden Stars, Fury of Dracula, Only War, Relic, Rogue Traitor, Space Hulk, Death Angel, Talisman, Warhammer Disc Wars, Fantasy Roleplay, Invasion the Card Game, Quest the Adventure Game, 40k, and any Fantasy Flight Supply games, including imagery licensed to Games Workshop.
Right, okay. that includes things like Shattered Stars, which was their brand new board game which they launched earlier in the year, which is like basically a 40k board game with loads of spaceships and various other bits and pieces. There's an ongoing living card game, which did Conquest, the 40k one. Okay, that's currently an ongoing one. Now, the interesting thing I thought is that not only are they stopping development, but they're stopping full sale. So that basically,
and they're also withdrawing organised play support for 40k Conquest.
Yeah. So basically, that means if you're interested in any of those titles and you want to get anything for those titles, get it before the 28th of February, because after that point, they are not going to be around anymore. At least not new.
Uh-huh.
Now, we could have a whole discussion about this, but do we have time?
Not today. One very quick one, which is not actually really a news item. It's just something I noticed that will be of interest to listeners who may have heard me mention occasionally the Tabletop YouTube channel, in which Will Wheaton reviews lots and lots of board games. If you can't get enough of that, then I strongly advise you to check out the Starlight Citadel channel. She's run by a couple of ladies who are Kandia Sadowski and Joanna Gaskell. They work for, or are produced, or work with the folks from Starlight Citadel, which is a whopping great online game shop in Vancouver. And they do 5 to 10 minute potted reviews of board games and board war games. They've even included reviewing things like the Westeros variant of Battle Lore. I strongly suggest you check them out if you're short of board games to buy for people.
Yeah, I've seen some of those. They are very good.
They've got really nice production values. They're very clearly presented. They've got about 60 or 90 plus game reviews, and I commend them to our listeners.
That's going to be about it for the hobby news this time. One thing I would point out to people is that I have just started doing a weekly Kickstarter roundup. Okay, so this is now it isn't all Kickstarters. These are the wargaming, new figure line, new game, maybe new scenery stuff that catches my eye and I quite like. So I'm not necessarily posting everything, but I'm posting everything that catches my eye and kind of thinking, oh, I like that. Okay, that is being posted up on Friday nights. Okay, so I'm trying every Friday night to do a roundup of the new Kickstarters that have launched that week that have caught my eye. Kickstarter is being quite busy at the moment, and there are some very interesting stuff around. So yeah, check it out. Hassle free. Kev White's doing one. Oh,
sigh for money.
That's really nice. That's really nice.
And he's not going to like them though.
They do at least one fully clothed version.
Yeah, but some of them are a bit cheesecakey. They're really good quality skulls, but some of them are a bit cheesecakey.
Oh yes. But there you go. Have you ever wondered what's going on in wargaming? We do too. So come with us as we go behind the hobby with the Meeples and Miniatures interview. We're very pleased to welcome back to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. Yes, having been here once, he's decided to come back. It's Sam Mustafa. Hello, Sam.
Hello, guys.
Hi, welcome back. It's fantastic to have you back on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
How have you been over the last 12 months? How's it been going for you?
I have been writing a book.
Oh.
Yeah, I spend. This is for the real job. This is not in any way wargame related, but I spend most summers in Germany, and I, as some of my folks know, and I've been working for about the last 6 years or so on a monograph, a historical book, and I think I'm finally done with the research, and I've started writing, and I've written about 200 pages or so. Mm-hmm. So hope to have it done this autumn.
6 years, crikey! That's a heck of a lot of research, Sam.
Well, I'm a big, serious historian, Neil. That's just the kind of people we are. That's what we're made of. No, the funniest thing about this is that the subject of the book is some of the Napoleonic gamers will be familiar with the Kingdom of Westphalia. So no one's ever written anything of length about this in English. But Napoleon, as he was dicing and slicing up Germany, he created this new kingdom and gave it to his little brother Jerome. But it lasted only a little more than 6 years, and then, of course, perished along with Napoleon's empire. So I have now spent as long working on the subject as the subject ever existed.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
It does, doesn't it?
I do like Westphalia. White uniforms? I remember.
Yeah,
white
most of them. Yeah, the line infantry were in white. Yeah.
Yeah, went to Russia, didn't they? And didn't really come back.
Yeah. Well, along with a lot of friends, yeah.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting book. Right. Put me down for a copy, thanks.
Okay, so 6 years research into writing. When do you think it's going to get published?
Well, I don't have a publisher yet. I mean, the publisher who did my last 2 books has said they want to look at this, but I may shop it around a bit. So it probably will be some point toward the end of 2017.
We could probably put you in touch with a publisher. We do know one.
Indeed, we do.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, there are certain criteria, of course, for an academic book. It has to be peer reviewed. There have to be people who are experts in or around the field who are, on a retainer for that publisher and so on and so on. So there's some. It can't just be any publisher. It has to be done in a way to ensure that I make no money whatsoever.
Ah, right. So you couldn't do the proper version for these and then do like a light version for this wargame full of nice pretty pictures.
Pictures are really, I mean, you have to pull teeth with publishers to get them to do anything. And then if you want to do anything that requires using permission, then you've got to pull teeth on 2 continents in 2 different languages. And it's just atrocious. I mean, to the extent that I can, my wife and I either create our own graphics, the maps and so on, or she's an artist, or we use public domain stuff because I've got all sorts of lovely photos, but, I've got to pay this archive $50 to use this, and I've got to get all these forms filled out, and then I've got to pay that archive $75 to use that, and it's just not worth it. And then the publishers also give you grief if you have too many pictures because apparently I don't know why in a digital era this matters, but apparently it increases their cost.
Ooh.
Oh, right. Okay.
Didn't know that. That's going to be the big difference between pop-up books and books for wargamers, which is stuffed full of images.
Yeah, well, there's different print runs as well. I mean, the stuff for wargamers tends to be, well, for one thing, marked up more, and for another, a smaller print run and distributed differently. The academic publishers tend to have, they sell to libraries and things like that, where they know they're going to sell X number of copies. They know it will never be a bestseller, but they know they will have however many thousand librarians all over the world who buy it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So whilst you haven't been talking about Westphalia and writing about it, you've been fairly busy on this front as well.
Yeah, I think you've released 2 sets of rules since we last spoke.
Oh, yeah. So we spoke, I think, in May of 2015, right after Bleacher had come out. I think, if my memory serves, Bleacher came out in March and we spoke in May. So, yeah, I think I mentioned at the time that 2016 was going to be my year to take care of some smaller projects that I wanted to do, not necessarily a big, expensive full-color book. I wanted to do there are certain smaller ideas that I wanted to do either print on demand or digital only, and I wanted to get some more cards out and so on. And I've pretty much done that, so I've sort of cleared the decks for 2016 and working on something else now.
Right. Okay. So if we can, let's take you back through 2015 and early 2016. Obviously, as I say, at the time we spoke, you had just started working on Aurelian.
Yes.
Which was your ancients rules, but very specific ancients rules, weren't they?
Right.
Now I know there has been moves by some people to kind of say, well, that's all well and good, but can we have more than 4 armies? And I understand also that was the first time that you produced something that was kind of fully digitally published, as opposed to going with a more traditional hard copy.
Right. Yeah, I did a lot of thinking about this. I didn't have any ambition to do the sort of grand ancients game that would be everything from Moses to Columbus, and I'm not an expert on that stuff anyway. I never really felt that I could pull that off. So if I was going to do a smaller
There's an
one,
argument that says it doesn't work anyway.
well, I don't know enough about it to know whether it does or not. I mean, I've certainly played a number of other Ancients games and had good games, but I was just very specifically interested in one subject, and I wanted to try this as an experiment. And this is, I need to speak about Aurelian and Freejumper almost in one breath, because these are both ideas that I thought, I don't know if I want to invest thousands of dollars and months of work doing hardback books, because I don't know how big an audience they're going to reach. So maybe this is something that's better for print on demand and PDF. In the case of Aurelian, there's a period of Roman history that I've always been fascinated by. It's the crisis of the 3rd century, and this is when the empire breaks into 2 and then into 3 pieces, and is in a sort of perpetual civil war for about 3 generations, and very nearly ceases to exist. And Aurelian is the guy who hammers it all back together again, of course. But that period I find really interesting, and the 4 main antagonists of that period are very different from each other. And so I wanted to create an Ancients game in which the different armies really played differently. And I thought a card-driven game really lends itself to that kind of project, because you can really customize the cards. Each army has a different set of cards that emphasizes what they can do and what they want to do. And the different armies have different kinds of victory conditions too. So they're not just fighting for the same objective marker or trying to mass points or whatever. So, and of course, any of the armies could fight itself in any plausible way. I mean, there were civil wars and wars within each of these configurations all the time. So I found that really interesting. And what Neil said at the beginning of this question about could there be more than 4 armies, the answer, of course, is yes. And some of the guys who really like Aurelian have kind of put a little pressure on me to, what about this? What about that? What about the Crusades, for instance, or what about the Swiss Wars and so on? And, if I had 1 million years to do it, then absolutely. They're in the back of my mind. I'm not sure when they're going to get to the front of my mind, but in that system, you can introduce any number of new armies, but they each need their own card set.
Yeah.
And that's not an insurmountable obstacle, especially with print on demand. I mean, it's no more difficult than what Saga does with the different boards and the different special rules for the Saga dice and so on. But it just hasn't been the number one priority. There are other things that I wanted to do, and then maybe I can revisit that or release those as supplements.
Yeah. So as I say, it was the first fully digital publication, although, as you say, the cards were available either to download or as print on demand. Mm-hmm. How did that actually work out for you? How have you found it?
Sure. Well, there's 2 ways to look at this. I mean, going into this, I knew that if I don't do a hardback book, that means sales will be numbered in the hundreds, not in the thousands, right? So I knew that going in. What I didn't know was I missing an opportunity? Had I done a hardback book, would sales have been in the thousands? I don't know. And because I couldn't answer that question, because it wasn't really sort of my usual kind of game, I decided to play it safe. And I'm generally kind of conservative with money because I do everything in cash. I don't do anything on debt. And, I just like always having the resources I need to do a project. And if I don't have them, I don't do it. Mm-hmm. So, it's never going to be a big, one of my popular games is never going to rival Belushi or LaSalle, for example, which have sold thousands of copies. But the people who play it absolutely love it. And I wish there were a way to get this sort of to more people, because it has Aurelian and Freejumper both have some unusual and fun mechanics that I'm sort of proud of. They're both diceless games. At least Freejumper's almost diceless. Aurelian is fully diceless. And the card play, I just think, is really cool. Some of those mechanics are going to reappear in future games in other ways just because I like them so much. But there's some neat things that Aurelian does. If I could just mention one,
Please. Yeah.
Because it has no dice, you still need some kind of sense of randomness, at least unpredictability, not knowing what the enemy is going to do, and so on. Mm-hmm. As with most of the games that I do that have cards, a card can do any number of things, but you can, if you use it for one thing, it precludes using it for another, and in some cases precludes using it forever for anything else. And they have this large number in a set of laurels, which is called the laurels value of the card. And that's a sort of generic value of the card in general that is used for the game's command system, is used for combat resolution, is used for a number of things. And the greater the exertion of what you're doing, the more strenuous thing you do, the more likelihood is that card will go away forever. So the more valuable thing you want to do with it and the higher value card you play for it, the more likely that you will never see that number again. So in a sense, you're literally running out of luck. Your card deck keeps getting smaller, and most Aurelian games end because one side is out of cards, because various things can happen that just take cards out of your deck, like losing an objective or the baggage or being plundered or having important units break and so on. So You don't know what the enemy has. It sounds dumb that you can choose. It's like choosing your own dice roll. Won't everyone always choose a 6? Well, of course they will, unless choosing a 6 means you'll never get a 6 again. So by using cards instead of dice, we can have a bigger spread of numbers. We can arrange them in a way that it's not symmetrical. There are more 3s than 2s, for instance, or something like that. And then we can taper them off as players use them, and they're going to have, knowing the cost of using it, they're going to have to decide, is it worth it for this? And there's some wonderful bluffing that goes on too. If I'm disadvantaged going into this combat, is it so important for me to win this combat that I'm going to burn up a great card? Or are you going to assume that I'm thinking that way and use your very best card? So should I then use a crap card, lose the combat, and make you lose a great card? So there's all sorts of wonderful things that I've done this game with a number of people who never played it before, and then I ask them at the very end, did you notice there were no dice? And they sort of scratch their heads and goes, well damn, there's no dice. They hadn't noticed.
So suppose you've got a card with a high laurel value. Are its other functions also powerful, or do you sort of average things out so a high laurel value card is not that brilliant in other aspects?
Generally, they are good in other aspects. So the card also has a rally value. And when rally is the most strenuous thing you can do. When you use cards for that, they always go away. And so, if you're rallying an important unit, you can sacrifice a good laurel card, even though you weren't using it for the laurels. And then the cards also have events and modifiers, and those are less linked to the value just because it's harder to place a number on them because it depends on the circumstances.
Is it worth having a quick overview of how the sort of cards work with the figures on the table? Because I think there might be a few people who might be a little bit confused of the sort of basic mechanics that you've got there.
Sure. You have a hand of cards, which you draw from a deck and you play from your hand, and then some cards are discarded and some are removed, and then you reload and do it again. It's an I go, you go game, but the length of the turns is variable depending on how you play. So to make units do things requires card play. You can use the laurels value to activate certain groups of units, and these are grouped by type or by function or by the terrain they're in. And, if the more you want to do, the higher value card you have to spend to do it. You can use a card at the start of your turn to play an event, and that event will give you some sort of lasting modifier through your turn. You can use a card that interrupts the enemy's turn and does the same, but against him. For example, you might play high winds, which means that his arrows are not going to be as effective this turn, something like that. Having moved your units, you can then shoot with some, the ones that haven't moved usually, although horse archers can do both. That costs cards. And then you can fight if you're in contact to do so. And in every contact that you have, whether shooting or fighting, you and your opponent each place a card face down beside the units in question. Now, because it's an Ancients game, there's a lot of contacts, because the armies tend to fight in lines or in blocks. When we get into contact, typically there's multiple contacts, so we have multiple combats to resolve. So you and I might be putting down 6 or 7 cards at once without knowing what we're putting down. Then we flip them over at the same time and see how we've done. You can draw a card from the top of your deck without knowing what it is, or you can play one from your hand. And sometimes if you've got some really luscious cards in your hands and you just don't want to lose them, it's better to just take a risk and draw from the deck. It's like rolling a die, in essence. Of course, there's also the risk that once you play cards for combat, the highest value card you played goes away forever. So there's a risk if you draw from the deck, you don't know what you're about to lose in terms of future opportunities. But you then reveal the cards, the differences by which each combat is adjudicated. Units have values and the terrain affects them and the card values affect them. That difference in the final result is how badly one side loses and or falls back. And then the breaking of units can also cost you cards. And typically the cards function as a kind of sand through the hourglass, as the time and energy of your army runs out, until somebody has lost by running out of cards, or the scenario might have a different victory condition in the campaign, particularly for the barbarian players, because they're looking to loot and get away usually.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that, as well as the cards that you use in the game, there's also unit cards, which is sort of similar to what you did with Blucher? And can you play the game just using these unit cards?
Oh, sure. I mean, we played with miniatures for the most part because we had them and liked them. But I decided to do this as print on demand in case people wanted. The average gamer probably does not have a Sarmatian army, for instance. But, for $20, you can have a Sarmatian army or any number of Sarmatian armies because you give enough cards to do all sorts of variations. And it's like Blucher in the sense that the unit card gives you a pretty picture. And then it gives you all the game values you need for that unit in some sort of attractive symbolic way. The number of swords is the fighting value of the unit. And if it has a black bow, that's not as good as a red bow for archery and things like that. So, yeah, there's 4 armies that you can just buy as unit cards from the print-on-demand site.
That's good because, it's a nice, easy way to get into it. And obviously we got the full campaign built into this because it's trying to cover the 75 years of this crisis.
Yeah, it depends on how you count, but 7 decades for sure. So yeah, you choose a role, and then again, depending on which one of the 4 sides you've chosen, your victory conditions are different. A Roman is ultimately trying to become emperor, so that means he has to beat up on other Romans as well as defend the empire from barbarians. Ultimately, there can only be one standing Roman player left, whereas a barbarian is trying to become the biggest, baddest barbarian, which he could do with or without fighting other barbarians. He's just trying to loot the empire. And the Roman player, when he fights the barbarian, his ideal outcome would be to recruit them. So, he's trying to add these Fiderata units that are proportionately cheaper than his Roman units are in terms of, the game's system of points. But they come with the problem that they don't respond as well. They're not as disciplined, and the Roman cards affect Roman units. They don't necessarily affect these Fiderati. So
it's the traditional die in front of our swords now or die for us a bit later if you want thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and the way I've tried to set this up is that the experienced Roman units you start with become more and more scarce as the campaign goes on. You could potentially keep recruiting experienced Roman units, but they get proportionately more expensive, harder to afford, and you would have a rather small army. So the temptation is overwhelming to recruit barbarians, which of course is what historically happened.
It does sound really interesting, especially as a campaign setting, and the fact that it's quite a easy one to get into by using the cards. As you say, you don't have to go off and create the whole Sassanid Persian army or a Roman army. You can just use the cards. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is very accessible, very easy to get into. Yeah. So,
and of course, you've done lots of downloads for it on the site. So you've got the cards that you can download, got the action cards.
And the unit cards, yeah.
And the unit cards, yeah, which is great. Yeah. It's probably also worth mentioning that Sir Toby, which I don't think is his real name, has done 4 really good tutorial videos.
Yeah, so he wishes to remain anonymous. He's not in the U.S., but he's a friend of mine overseas, and he's an absolutely brilliant painter and a terrific photographer. And the photographs of his figures they're just mind-boggling. I've got a couple on my website for people who are interested. The close-ups of the Persian elephants and just to give you miniatures envy. And he did these. he did these 4 videos explaining the game. There's links to them from my website, and they're on YouTube. And he did them in sort of movie trailer style, which is wonderful. So they're very melodramatic, and they're done in the sense of the next Russell Crowe movie.
Yeah, I was watching the first couple today just to catch up on the rules and just thinking these are really good. These are really, really good. But yeah, it even though I'm not really into this sort of period of history, I do look at it and think, I could do a little campaign with this. Just get the cards and the rule.
Oh yes, I remember, Mike. Yes, you're not. You're not a big fan of Romans, are you?
I don't do Romans now. For me, it's Greeks or nothing. I know there are Sassanids, Persians in this, so it kind of scratches that.
That's my favorite army, actually. The Persians they're such a strange army. They are strong at the extremes and weak in the middle. They've got these elite shock units, and they've got elephants, and who can resist having elephants? And then they've got this horde of crap, that if the Romans can put up with being pelted with 1 billion arrows and finally get across the field, they'll just carve through these guys like a knife through butter. But they're perpetually harassed by horse archers and the various innovative scum.
Yeah. Plus, they're a very pretty army, the Persians.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yes, very pretty, or a painter's nightmare, depending which way you look at it. Yeah.
Which is why I'm thinking cards. Hey,
yeah, and the cards actually are photos of Toby's units. So they're actually the photos of they're close-ups of these 28 millimeter figures that he's done. So they're photos of miniatures. I'm by no means a great painter, but I managed to put together some decent Romans and Persians for this game.
So that was Aurelian, and then which was for people who kind of are fans of yours would have thought Ancients as opposed to Horse and Musket was kind of appeared to be stepping outside of your comfort zone, and then Freejumper came along.
Yeah. So I've been a sci-fi fan with some caveats. I don't like it all, but ever since I was a kid, and I do love a good spaceship game. And it's kind of hard to find a good spaceship game. I know you probably disagree. There's people got 100 favorites that I've never played, but the ones that I've had the opportunity to play over the years just haven't done it for me. I wanted something that sort of felt different. One of the problems I found was that I didn't like being handed somebody else's idea of what a good spaceship should be. Mm-hmm. I felt like, well, why can't I make my own spaceship? And the other thing was that many of these sci-fi games, I like naval games too, and they tended to play sort of like dreadnoughts in space. They've got turrets and they sail in these formations and you hit broadsides and stuff like that. And I'm thinking that's just kind of silly. I mean, yeah, if anyone, all we have to do is look at 21st century weapons and where things are going to know that if we survive as a species in order to fight in space, then it's not going to look anything like turrets and launching fighter planes and stuff like that. I mean, come on. Arguably, by the time you and I are dead, people won't be actually flying fighter planes. It'll all be drones and robots and stuff. So I wanted a game that really was futuristic, and it occurred to me that maybe the ship itself should be the character. Instead of you being a human in a ship, maybe you're a ship. And so the ship is a sort of a character. It's self-aware, and you design it the way you would design a role-playing character. Which for many people who play RPGs, designing a character is a game unto itself, right? I mean, it can be a lot of fun. So I wanted that to be fun, simple. So it needed the card system needed to be very easy to needed to make the ship very easy to alter or to renovate or upgrade, so that if your ship gets a little bit beat up, it can be literally shown by your missing cards or whatever. Things have gone missing or they're floating off in space somewhere. You can go and buy new ones and clamp them onto your ship. So I began to conceive of this as somewhere between maybe the Millennium Falcon and the Serenity. It's a privateer. It's a smuggler ship. It is by no means a big battle wagon. It can defend itself if need be, and it can throw a few punches, but really its job is to get in, perform a little mission, and get out and make some money and improve the ship. And perhaps then one day trade in and buy a new ship and do it again. So it's a sort of ongoing campaign. It's a limitless campaign. But the game itself, the actual meeting, when you sit down and play a scenario, it needed to be under an hour. And so I wanted combat to be very simple and fast. There's no roll to hit, roll for damage, and so on. You play cards against each other, and there's an interaction of various systems that doesn't require dice. I have a weapon that can hit you. You've got a defense that can stop it, and that's that. And if that sounds boring, there were 2 ways we came up with to make it really interesting and unpredictable. Well, 3 actually was very simple. One is that you play the card face down. So you have to. All I tell you is that I'm shooting a beam. There's different kinds of weapons. I'm shooting a beam weapon at you. You've got a defense for it, but you might not be aware how many beam weapons I have online or what they can do. Should you use your defense against this one, or am I bluffing and my big bad beam weapon is coming next after your defense is now down? So that's one way of making it interesting without dice. The other way is that sometimes the weapon might be stopped by the defense, but then damages the defense, right? It shorts out your shields. I wanted there to be a sense of sparks flying and wires coming down from the ceiling and so on. When the shield worked, but it won't work again, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a chance that can happen. And then finally, the ships don't interact in a predictable way. Every ship has a series of chits. And the ship has a brain, and the brain has a value that determines how many opportunities you get to do different things. And those opportunities are shown by drawing a chit. And so you may know that my ship is smarter than yours, but you might get lucky and get in the first punch, and that can make a big difference. So we don't use much dice. There's only one thing in the game that requires dice, and that's that thing I mentioned where the weapons, some of the big powerful weapons have a chance to short out a defensive system, and that's called punch. And if a weapon has a die symbol on the card, you have to roll for its punch to see if it punched the defense system. Everything else is diceless.
It is a good game. I can definitely attest to that.
And Mike Hobbs has played it. Mike Hobbs, he had to get used to the super speed at which we operate here at Honor Games.
Yeah.
Okay, how fast is that then, guys?
Very. Very, very fast. Completely different to what I'm used to with any other game I play tested. I think I will say that. I actually sent you a mail going, "What's happening, Sam?"
Yeah.
It was a few days.
It was a slightly plaintive tone to his email. Yeah, I have a wonderfully indulgent group of playtesters, and some of these guys have been with me now for like 4 or 5 and 6 games. So they've just gotten used to my style, and I sometimes come up with different versions, in the course of the same week. So
right.
It was almost daily at one step.
Well, sort of. I mean, this thing on page 23 should be changed, and then the day later I think, well, damn, that really means this thing on page 28 needs to be changed also. So yeah, but my assumption is always that you'll play it when you get around to playing it, and whatever version is most current when that day happens, that's the version you play, and you let me know how it goes.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was a really interesting experience doing the play testing.
So what's the phrase? Dynamic.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting game.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, I really like it. Unfortunately, I haven't had much chance to play it since we actually did all the play testing. I think I got burnt out, and then the War of 1812 arrived.
Yes.
It's my go-to game for a pickup. I take it with me when I travel because you only need one miniature, and a little handful of cards, and that's it. I like how portable it is and how fast it is, and you really can, it's the game you can play before dinner and then you play the other game after dinner or something like that. But the other thing I wanted to do with Freejumper was, even though I knew this would never be a big, there's no media franchise I've bought the license for. It's never going to compete with X-Wing or Star Wars, Trek or anything like that. But I wanted to do something very different from the way that most sci-fi games conceive of weapons and defenses and damage, which again is a bit like dreadnoughts in space. There's sort of a 2-layer model in which all the weapons, regardless of their name or their physics, they do some sort of damage points against shields. And then once the shields get battered into submission, then the weapon starts digging into the ship itself. And the difference between weapon types, I find in naval games too, is not much more than the range or the number of dice they can roll. Damage is just damage.
Yeah.
And you can have all these sort of sci-fi sounding names to your weapons. I've got this quantum torpedo, defragilatic, chemostatic, muse shifter, accelerator thing. But really it's just big short range gun or small long range gun or whatever. So I wanted to make sure that the weapons are really different kinds of weapons. They require different kinds of defenses, and they do different kinds of damage if they succeed. So if you imagine, for example, if you had to protect yourself against bullets, radiation, a drone, and a hacker, right? You would need 4 very different kinds of defenses. And failing that, each would do something different to you, right? I mean, the bullet does something very different than the hacker does, but you don't want either one to happen. So that's the sort of combat matrix I was after.
Yeah, and that's really in there. And the way that you build your ships, like you say, it's really simple. You buy a hull, you buy an engine, and you buy some bits to hack onto it. And you can go very defense heavy and just try to defend everything to do the scenario, or you can go combat heavy, or you can go somewhere in the middle, and you'll never get it right because the ships can only hold so much, and you only have so much money. So, and you don't even know what you're going to be going up against. So it's it's a very infuriating game, but it's a very good game. One of the German playtesters has a ship that it's entirely broadcast weapons, which is basically computer hacking and viruses and worms and stuff. And he named it the SS Edward Snowden. Yeah, but I mean, Freejumper again is well worth looking at. The rules are on PDF. Get the cards and give it a go. It's a great game. Really good fun. And as Sam said, it only lasts 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
All scenario led. But you always forget what the scenario is because you're too busy trying to stop your opponent from shooting you.
Or your friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually your friend.
Do you actually need miniatures for the game?
Well, no. I mean, well, I mean, sure. Do you need miniatures for any game, right? I mean, okay. You need some sort of token, obviously. Right. It could be a picture of a spaceship on a bottle cap or something, but come on, get a spaceship. It's just one spaceship.
Very true. No, it was obviously with the direction you've gone with Blucher and Aurelian. It was just a thought of. And looking at the a couple of pictures on the website and these spaceships flying around and stuff. It's like, well, do you need that, or actually can you almost play it like a modelless RPG sort of game, or is it a case of you still need that physicality there?
You need to know where the location of things are because things get measured. If you go to the website, some of the pictures of Freejumper, the ships for the most part are old Ground Zero Games ships that I've had for years, but most of the accessories are scratch built by G.P. Aroldi, who's a friend of mine and a gamer here, who has some listeners might know him as Lord Ashram's House of War. He has a blog and a website talks about gaming, but he's a great scratch builder, and he did the planets. He did the asteroids with the strange creatures coming out of them, and he did this space. Sometimes it's a space station, sometimes it's a spaceship, but it looks sort of like the old Skylab with solar panels on it. The core piece of it is a lug nut from a car wheel, and then I don't know how he made the solar panels, but they look brilliant. So if ever a game lends itself to artistic license, it is this one, because we assume the ships are ugly because they've probably been used several times and not always gently.
Got you. Okay. No, that's right. So Freejumper was released in May. So I suppose it would be remiss of us to not to ask, what have you been up to since May? I mean, what else have you got currently on the go?
Yeah, so there've been two things. I needed to get a couple of print-on-demand card products out first.
Right.
There were a few other unit card sets from Blueshare that still needed to be released. And then the stuff from following on from Aurelian, the unit cards for them and so on. So I've sort of cleared the decks. And in 2016 was my year to take care of the to-do list of smaller projects.
Right.
You asked me earlier about print on demand. I think print on demand is sort of a reasonable compromise that it's allowed me to keep certain out of print products in print. The most recent example being the cards from Longstreet. The original cards from the game Longstreet have sold out. I'd like the game to stay in print because every now and then somebody still wants to buy it and people still play it. So I've re-released them as a set on print on demand. And, that allows me to do things like Ottoman, Turkish, Napoleonic unit cards, for example. I mean, I could never find enough customers to do a conventional print run of those. But there are a couple hundred people who want them. So that's a perfect example of what print on demand is good for. The downside, of course, is that the higher per unit cost means that I can't sell them wholesale to dealers. I mean, this is something that only could be done print on demand. If you're going to go that way, then it's direct interface with the customer. And the other downside is that it can be a bit confusing. A customer comes to my website looking for product X, but the result is that he has to click away and buy it from somebody else's website.
Yeah. And
in fact, right now, my product line is sort of in transition because about half of my products are on my web store and the other half are on somebody else's, right? They're on drive-through cards. The last issue is that it doesn't really address shipping cost. And this is just killing American game designers because the cost of shipping a small package overseas is bad. And a print-on-demand printer has to be based somewhere. And in my case, it's Drive-Thru Cards, who's based in the U.S. And I like working with them. And having them based in the U.S. makes it easier for me to deal with them. We speak the same language. We operate under the same laws, have the same tax system, and so on. And those guys are particularly good at service and support. And their store is very logical. It's easy to use. But it means that a British customer like you would still have to pay $20 or $30 in postage for a little $20 set of cards. I have spent months looking for a British equivalent of drive-through cards, and I've not been able to find one. I've dialogued with a number of printers, I think about 8 of them now, but none of them have all the services and the same kind of interface from the publisher's point of view, and that's the key. It's just harder doing business like that overseas because if there's a dispute, it's difficult to resolve.
Yeah.
So I have not yet found a print-on-demand interface either in Britain or in Down Under or in the EU.
Because Mike, you've been looking at print on demand, haven't you?
Yes, but only books, not cards.
Ah, right.
I do have a very useful contact for books, who is our club secretary's missus.
There's a lot of print on demand, especially in Britain, where they sort of function just like a regular printer, but more expensively. You only need 200 copies, fine, they'll do 200 copies for you and then ship them to you, just like a regular printer would do 2,000 or 5,000 or whatever. That's not what I need. What I need is the customer to be able to go somewhere, click, and have a product. And I need that interface to be as smooth as possible. And then once a month, I empty my account with that printer and, I record that for my tax purposes, and he takes care of inventory. I don't have to worry about it. That's Drive-Thru Cards does that very well, and I've not yet been able to find anyone outside the U.S. who can do all those things.
Which is a shame because it's sort of cutting down, a possible bunch of revenue. Because I'll be honest, whilst I'm quite happy to pay $20 for a set of cards, if I then had to pay, $20 to get it posted, you sort of think, may as well just get some decent paper and get it printed out on my home printer. And and that's the same is true for the things that aren't on print on demand. I mean, I sold just this morning, for example, I got an order from Britain for a set of the Maurice cards. Now, this is something that I sell for $16, 16, right? 16 is very cheap. I deliberately take a loss on the printing, on the shipping charge. Otherwise, nobody would order it. But what it means is this guy spent more on postage than he spent on the product. Mm-hmm.
Now, hopefully it's worth it. He's probably smart enough to think total equals this. It's worth it. I want the product. Click, right? I mean, he must have made that decision.
Yeah.
But the majority of the money is going to shipping.
God bless Brexit.
Well, no, that's not the problem. The problem is the American side of things, isn't it? It's the
yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's all the American shippers that because it kind of hit. Was it about 12, 18 months ago? It really kind of started to bite, and of course, it affects everybody in the US, and especially where you end up in situations where you had all those companies doing crowdfunding projects, and then all of a sudden, all their shipping costs went through the roof, didn't it?
Yeah, that is one of there's a couple of reasons why I've not done crowdfunding. One of them is my basic conservatism with money that I mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but the other is that I have a real tough time imagining how I would make that argument to overseas customers for a product that let's say the product cost $40, a nice colorful book or a box set or something like that. Let's just imagine $40. For a British customer, you would need to, if that's the only thing in the package and it weighs less than 2 pounds, there's a lot of ifs here, and the rates don't change again before it comes out. If, then I would need to ask you to pay me about $33 in postage with your pledge, right? So you pledge, $73 for a $40 product.
Yeah.
And
Is that including customs?
No, it's not. Although books are exempt from VAT, right? We don't have VAT in the U.S., so it's a bit different for us. But the way I would have to do this to make it even reasonably attractive would be to eat some of that shipping cost. In other words, give British customers a better deal than I give my own American domestic customers, just because otherwise no Brit in his right mind would order the damn thing. But then, in addition to eating the shipping cost, I would have to bear in mind that there's the actual cost of using crowdfunding in the first place, right? So, when you start adding up the 10% chopped off there and maybe 15% more eaten from the shipping cost and so on, pretty soon it just doesn't make sense to do it.
Yeah, we had a similar discussion with Byron Collins from Collins Epic War Games about this very same subject.
Mm-hmm.
The point I was saying about the Brexit was the way that the exchange rate has changed.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas before, when it was $1.50 to £1.
Mm-hmm.
If the postage was $20 or $30, you sort of think, well, okay, but that sort of works out at 10 quid or so. It doesn't work. But now the pound is $1.20 or something.
Mm-hmm.
It suddenly tips it over the edge a little bit. So it's it's a tricky one.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I've got plans for 2017 that involve going back to big expensive products, and most of my customers are in Britain or the EU, and that's I don't know. We're gonna try.
Maybe it's worth getting them printed over here and
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, I haven't printed in the U.S. since Maurice, right? So that was 2007 or something. Belusha was printed in Lithuania, but of course, Lithuania is an EU country, and you guys just decided to take a walk out of that. So I don't know how that'll affect shipping from the EU to the UK. So we will see.
Yeah, we haven't got a clue either, Sam. But ask us to get in about a year to 18 months.
Yeah, and we might maybe have some idea because I'm sure actually
or not, as the case may be.
Yes, it seems to be going that way at the moment, but never mind.
Oh, but one last thought on that, by the way. On behalf of the Germans, they're very upset at you. I just want to let you know. I was in Berlin when Brexit happened, and everyone they asked me all to wag a finger at you.
Trust me, 48% of us are very upset at us as well.
Yeah.
I don't have a dog in this fight, obviously, but on behalf of our German colleagues, they want me to say tisk tisk.
Right.
We don't want to
Noted.
upset the Germans.
Yeah, you just had to go there, didn't you? Okay, and at which point we'll step away, right? Okay. Okay, so you hinted, So you hinted that 2016 clearing the decks for going back to a big product in 2017. Can you tease us? Go on. What are you working on?
Absolutely, yeah. I am working on Rommel. So this hopefully will be another hardback full color book.
Mhm.
I have to be a little vague because we're still developing this, and much could change. But I will tell you what I can say with some certainty. So it almost certainly will be ready in 2017. Don't ask me when; I don't know. It will, like Bleacher and Aurelian, you don't have to have the figures. You could play with or without miniatures. I think that's sort of the way I'm going to go from now on. It's a tabletop game you can use with or without figures.
Mm-hmm.
It will probably use some sort of area movement. We've been working on different kinds of that, and it really just seems better. I'll talk about the scale in a moment for what we want to do. Regarding the name, it's not just about North Africa. It's all of European World War II. I just honor games. Typically, I choose a name of a person whose career reflects the kind of things the player would do in the game. And since Rommel was a divisional commander and a corps commander and an army commander and an army group commander, and he fought in 3 major campaigns, and people like him. It's a name everyone knows how to spell for a Google search. And I like the opportunity of finding a good German. We can dib a little bit about his political leanings, but generally he's considered clean. The Nazis killed him after all. So I like naming it after him. I'm not gonna try to take my risks naming it after some other German. So the scale. All right. So I mentioned in our last interview that I've never been a huge fan of skirmish games.
Yeah.
Not because they're not good games. I mean, I've played several that are obviously good games, but it's just not my thing. I have no particular skill or talent for figuring out which part of the church steeple I need to put the MG42 in, or really caring about whether I'm shooting a coaxial machine gun or a turret-mounted machine gun or whatever, or hull-mounted or whatever. Also, I think right now the hobby is just absolutely swamped with World War II skirmish games.
Yeah.
We've probably reached a 1-to-1 ratio now of gamers to games in World War II skirmish. So I don't want to try to add another competitor to that big pile. What interests me is the big picture. When I read about the Second World War, I've always been more interested in operational decisions. I want to know what the 11th Panzer Division is doing. I want to know when we're going to release the reserves, when the air power is available due to weather and so on. Why the First Guards Tank Army suddenly stopped, and because they ran out of gas or something like that. So I'm interested in these big questions of running entire large formations on the table. And therefore, Rommel is a big-scale World War II game. You would command entire divisions, corps, maybe even an army. And that's why area movement tends to work better. We're not fighting over a hill. We're fighting over a kilometer of hilly ground, and the area is roughly a kilometer. So, you do not put every little house or village on the table. You would only put a town on the table if it fills most of a kilometer, if it were really to have an effect on large numbers of men. And the decisions you make in the game are therefore not so much tactical as operational. You need to decide how to make sure you've got momentum, and you can, some units need to create a breakthrough, other units need to exploit that breakthrough. You need to keep lines of communication open. You need to deny the enemy his lines of communication if possible. Air power is lovely, but it depends on the cloud cover and the weather. Your artillery might be in range, but you might not be available exactly when you need it, when you're hoping, because of logistical concerns and so on. So you're managing these large forces, and we're looking at a couple different core mechanics that drive the game, 2 of which are card based. It seems likely, and there's an asterisk here, but it seems likely this will be a card driven game. The most promising model for it thus far, the one I'm doing on Saturday, in fact, is sort of a cross between Longstreet and Aurelian, in that it uses a hand of cards with events and interrupts and modifiers, and the cards give you different options for force management. And the decks will, like Aurelian, they'll be nationally variable. So a German player in 1944 has a very different set of cards from a German player in 1941.
Right.
In 1941, he's got air power, his operational options are different. And in 1944, he's on the defensive, and he's got some excellent tank hunters in 1944 that he didn't have in 1941, but they really are emphasizing things like ambush positions and trying to get your men, trying to use the terrain and get your men into the right positions they need so that they can do the job, even though you're not gaming out every step of them doing that job.
Right, okay.
Oh, it sounds really tempting now.
I can't, and again, by the time this podcast airs, things might have changed because the game is we're in a very dynamic stage of playtesting right now. But I'm leaning toward, and some of the playtesters are banging their heads against the wall to hear me say this, but I'm leaning toward a card-driven game because I like the ability of cards to give units characteristics that are unpredictable. For example, Soviet infantry in the early war sometimes surrendered en masse if you sneezed at them, and sometimes fought fanatically to the last man.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of giving them a unit value that requires dice that, is a sort of set of chances for something happening, the cards can give you a limited set of chances and opportunities to apply things like this under certain circumstances, and you don't need a lot of data on the units. And so I'm leaning toward that kind of dynamic. And again, I'm leaning toward it being a diceless game.
Ooh, wow.
What about a playing surface? Because from what you're describing, it almost feels like a Kriegsfield style game. I can imagine you playing this over like a huge map instead of a sort of regular playing surface.
Well, the size of playing surface you need, like all my games, scales to the size of playing piece you've got. Okay, so right now what we're doing in playtesting, I've got a standard 4x6, green felt thing, and I break it up into the areas that represent kilometers, and I'm using unit cards that are more or less the size of my Flames of War 15 millimeter World War II figures, so like 2 inches wide, basically. Which just is convenient. If you got a 6-inch square area on a table, you could fit 3 units in that area, and so it's just convenient. But if you were using micro armor, for instance, you could play this game on your coffee table. It would be a bit, you probably need good glasses, but it would be a bit small. But you could certainly do it. There's not a lot of data you need to record on the units themselves, which is another reason I like the idea of card driven. There's a very limited track on each unit. You just need to mark it or it's not marked, sort of like Blucher, and that's it. There's less data on the units than there is in Blucher, in fact.
Oh, right.
Or if you go for like a standard card unit, or a card-sized unit, then it doesn't matter what goes on top of it. You could put a couple of micro armor tanks on there, or a couple of 50 mil, figures or whatever. So,
right. Yeah, if you had 15 millimeter, it might be just one big Tiger, Tiger tank, and that's the heavy Tiger Battalion 511 or whatever. But if you had micro armor, it could be several of them on that size base. I leave that. I don't worry about that stuff anymore. I leave the aesthetic concerns to the players themselves, and I figure they're smart enough to scale up or down as they need.
It will probably be a good discussion to have with someone like Cigar Box, who did your wonderful Waterloo map, about doing some specific maps that you could use in, across the different theaters. That would be quite interesting.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. I mean, I talk to those guys every so often. We collaborate sometimes, and we certainly try to promote each other's products. But I haven't yet. It's too soon. I mean, I haven't yet really sort of gotten the nitty gritty down with them about what they would like to do with that. But again, the area based concept, I think it works really well because it handles things that more literal tabletop games have trouble with. For example, combined arms, and I'm used to thinking of this in Napoleonic terms where there's this, there's interplay between the combined arms, but they don't intermix. The cavalry is nearby forcing infantry into squares, but it never gets in the midst of your artillery or whatever. That would cause chaos. But in World War II, you do need to conceive of tanks and infantry operating together intermixed, especially armored infantry. And doing that without areas can be tricky. Doing it as an area-based game really solves a lot of problems very beautifully, because just putting them in the area together says, okay, these guys are operating as a team now, and we treat them as a single entity. and their values are combined, and you get that combined arms and so on. And it works really well that way.
Okay, so with what you said, are potentially, we're looking at something like, for example, a 12 by 8 squared area. As a sake of argument, you're saying, maybe having 6-inch squares on a 6x4 table or something like that. Yeah.
Sure. But, obviously, if people like the game and they want to take it as a club project, they could do the entire Battle of the Bulge. Right? I mean, if they have a big enough table, that the game scale is such that with a team of 5 players on a side, you could do Stalingrad.
Wow. Now, there's a challenge.
Given a suitably sized church hall, you could do it like the Huntington Club did in 54 mil.
Right. Well, I leave this sort of to the taste of individual players, but my conception of it is I want it to play like something you might read about when you read about, I don't know, the Kasserine Pass, or the Germans are counterattacking at Mortain in Normandy or something like that. It's a story that involves multiple large units, or at least the elements of them. You might not have every unit of the 17th SS Panzer Grenadiers on the table, but you've got a battle group from them on the table, and that represents 4 or 5 bases or something like that. I want that kind of narrative happening in the game.
That does sound interesting.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm not volunteering to play test it, though.
Oh, why not, Hobbsy?
I got too much on. I know I've got quite a lot of GHQ German stuff here.
Just to let you know, in the time that we've done this interview, I've already done 5 new revisions of it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that time at all. My poor printer almost died last time. And that was a small game.
Oh, you probably heard the hesitation in my voice when I said I think it's going to be a card-driven game.
That was half an hour ago.
Yeah.
Well, I'm well aware. I'm well aware of the stigma. I mean, I've been catching up. I didn't listen to your podcast while I was in Germany. I didn't do anything while I was in Germany except work, and drink a few beers. But I'm catching up on the old Meeples and Miniatures podcast that I missed over the summer, and I was listening to that thing with Rich Clark. And it was as if he was describing my business. I mean, he's talking about the sort of stigma of different kinds of game mechanics. And I just thought I would share this because it's funny. I got an email from a guy a couple of weeks ago who was interested in Longstreet, but he doesn't like card-driven games. So he asked if there was a version of the game available without cards. Now, the smart-ass in me wanted to answer, well, sure, that just like there's a version of Monopoly without houses and hotels or the jail. No, of course there's not a version without cards. That's the game. That's how it plays. It has cards. So I just answered no, but I asked him why he didn't like card games, and he didn't really have an answer. He just said something like, I don't like that sort of playing style. And really, that's all one can say, right? I mean, you can't answer that any more than you could answer why you like pistachio ice cream better than chocolate ice cream, right? I mean, if you try to press people too hard on this sort of thing, they just feel compelled to make up artificial answers. People just like what they like, and they don't need reasons. So I just make the game that I like best, and the one that the playtester tells me worked the best, and then I hope for the best.
I think it'll go well, because I don't think there's any other... Exactly. I'm trying to think if there's any other sort of divisional level games out there at the moment.
No.
Other than ball games. I mean, Spearhead is the only one I can think of, and that's probably a little bit smaller scale.
Oh no, Spearhead's a platoon scale. Each playing piece is a platoon. That was all the rage in the 90s. There were a lot of games of that scale 20 years ago, like Command Decision and so on. The only large-scale World War II game I'm aware of was by a British author about 25 years ago, and it was called Mega Blitz. And it was just a very simple, about 20 pages with a staple in the middle of it. Sort of, I don't want to say amateurish, but it was had hand-drawn art and stuff like that.
It's pretty much all you had back then, let's face it.
Yeah.
The name rings a bell, though I don't think I've ever seen it.
I think the author's last name was G-O-W, pronounced Go or Gow or something like that. Anyway, so I'm not aware of any other game that does World War II in this scale. Now, that might be because I'm insane and no one but me wants to play a game at this scale. So we'll find out.
Well, I don't know. I think I think you got at least a couple of people who are interested here.
The thing is when you start getting to that sort of level, people start thinking about board games, because board games seem to handle the bigger picture better than war games.
Well, sure, but it depends on the board game, obviously. I don't see a huge difference between board games and war games. I mean, people often say these kinds of things anecdotally, like, well, we've crossed a line from board gaming to wargaming. I don't really see that line. I mean, a playing piece is a playing piece, and a playing surface is a playing surface to me. And the way we make rules for it, it just hopefully just is the best way to do what the game wants to do. I think miniatures games designers would probably be pretty foolish if they were not to steal ideas from board gaming. I've stolen most of my quote unquote best ideas have been ripped off from board games.
You're spot on, by the way, Sam. Tim Gow.
Tim Gow. That's right.
Of the War Games Development Group.
Indeed.
Yes.
There are still a few pages kicking around the internet about Mega Blitz as well.
I never played it, but I have a copy of it somewhere downstairs.
I think if you can crack this nut, I think it'll go really well. I mean, I could see people using it as a campaign system, even, to drive games maybe at a smaller level. There's lots of things you can do when you start getting into the big divisional level games.
Oh, sure, yeah. And I've been thinking in terms of, how Blucher has the pre-game called Scharnhorst, where the maps scale directly to the table scale, and you just set up that bit of map as your table. I've been thinking a lot about that and doing something like that for Rommel as well, that you could do it in either direction. You could zoom in the way Scharnhorst does to your table, zoom out rather, or do what you're describing and zoom in, which would be that these two squares on your Rommel board game are now a Chain of Command game or Flames of War game or whatever. Zooming way in, you've got a battalion sitting there, and now that battalion is a bunch of figures, and it's got anti-tank guns and anti-aircraft assets and so on.
Yeah. Sorry, my brain's not working 19th.
Yeah, he's got that. There's that tone in Hobbs' voice which says, "I'm not really here. I'm planning my next campaign."
I might take out my GHQ stuff and have a look at it.
Now look what you've done, Sam.
I'm not volunteering to playtest.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
By the third time he says it, there'll be a maybe in his voice.
Keep on, Tim. He'll crack eventually.
Do my best.
So, what else do we want to talk about?
What's the phrase? What's that? Moving quickly on? Is that Mr. Hobbs?
The word is swiftly. I keep telling you.
Sorry, I do apologise. You've got Rommel on the go now. Is this something that Rommel is something you're working on at the moment, but you've got other ideas, or is Rommel pretty much your main and only focus at this point in time, other than the book, of course? Yeah,
well, the book devours a lot of energy and time, of course. So it's really sort of book Rommel, and then life. It comes in a distant third at the moment. No, I do. I came up last night, in fact, with an idea for a purely card game that's just it's not a war game at all. What I do usually is I quickly sketch down 1 or 2 pages of notes to myself, and then file it in this folder with a billion similar 1 or 2 pages of notes for one fine day when I get around to doing this. I'll pluck something out of there. But I just need more time. If only I had clones, I could assign them all these brilliant ideas. I guess not having clones is protecting me from the realization that they might not be as brilliant as I think they are. But by pushing them to fruition. But anyway, yeah, Rommel's the only thing I've got at the moment that I know for sure is going to happen.
Well, Sam, it sounds like you've already sold us on another game.
Excellent.
No. So Rommel sounds really interesting. And as you say, it's operational level is not something that you come across very often these days. So it will be really, really interesting to see what you do with it. And yeah, looking forward to it already. So at what point in January in 2017 is it going to be released? Or is that just pushing it just a little bit?
Yeah, just a little bit. The reason, of course, that one of the reasons that 2016 was my small projects year was that I didn't have to worry about printing and customs and shipping and all that stuff, which not only adds massive amounts of money and headache, but also, of course, time. Just the time spent laying out a book and then proofing and correcting and so on with the printer. And then in the case of Bleacher, for example, we had a strike at the ports in California, and the thing sat in the container ship for something like 6 weeks. And I have not missed that. I miss having a nice, pretty physical product in my hand. I like books, but I don't miss the hassle that involved in making them and sending them around the world.
But of course, I suppose with the fact that we're talking World War II here, which is probably the third biggest wargaming market after sci-fi and fantasy, it almost demands a hard copy product, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah. And I think that one of the things I was doing in 2016 was this experiment to see how seriously people will take the products if they're only digital. And it was about what I expected. It was a fraction of what would happen if there was a hardback book. And I know that these are not scientific studies because every game has a different topic and it may or may not interest people in a certain way. But I think that gamers are of a certain age, and although we all use computers and we read PDFs, nonetheless, because we are tabletop gamers, we're used to collecting physical things. And I am no different from anyone else in that regard. I like a nice pretty book.
And to be honest, if you are actually playing on a table, it's much easier with a physical book than it is with a tablet.
Really?
Yeah. That's why if you put something out in print and digital, I'll buy both.
I find the tablet easier myself. I mean, the tablet doesn't want to fold itself back shut again, and I can zoom in and look at the print larger or the illustration if I need to.
It's weird. Having had both, I always find if I've got both available, I'll always use the print.
Yeah, I'm the same. Odd.
I will. Well, I'll tend to use a tablet because it's, as you say, it's less hassle at times than having a book that you constantly having to thumb through. Whereas, and especially if you've got a navigatable PDF, I find that a lot easier. Having said that, sometimes trying to do it on a smartphone as opposed to a tablet is another matter entirely.
No, I just steal my wife's iPad.
That's where I'm missing it. That's where I'm missing it. What I need to do is
missing a trick there somewhere, Neil.
Yeah, what I need to do is to get Dave to buy an iPad for me. That's what it's.
Well, maybe
given that the pair of you go on like an old married couple, it'll be fairly close, won't it?
Maybe the guy who does all the cakes for you can arrange something.
Don't mention the cake.
There you go. There you go, Mervyn. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
What we'll do, we'll take a quick break from this part of the conversation, but we have another big subject to discuss with Sam. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll having more discussion with Sam Mustafa. Well, welcome back. We're still talking with Sam Mustafa. Sam, as well as discussing what you've been up to and obviously looking forward to Rommel and 2017, when we got into email discussions about you coming back on the show, you were quite keen that we have a kind of a wider hobby discussion, weren't you?
Yeah, part of that is just because we don't really have a lot of shows like yours here. You know, we don't have hobby magazines really anymore here. We don't have a whole lot of, you know, there are websites, but not a whole lot of, you know, podcasting that reaches an audience as big as yours. And I wanted to talk about this with somebody sort of in a manner of, you know, what's going on in the American gaming scene, particularly with regard to historical gaming, which is my first love.
Yeah. Okay, well, especially with the fact that we now have somebody with first-hand experience of the American historical game who is a presenter. Step forward, Mr. Whitaker.
Who, me?
Yeah, take your finger off the mute button, mate.
All right, then.
Yes. I remember you saying last time when we were on the show, which was episode 154, folks, if you're struggling to find it. I know one thing you were mentioning was the fact that your audience seemed to be skewing much more towards Europe than America.
Yeah, it's very dramatically so. Dramatic's the wrong word unless you look at it long term, but over a period of more than a decade. I mean, my first game that sold any large numbers, I think more than 60%, maybe 70% of the customers were Americans. And now I think most recently it's down to about 22 or so. I think close to 60% of my customers now are British.
So do you think that's kind of indicative of what you've seen happening in the hobby in the States?
Well, okay. So in preparation for this discussion, I asked 9 people in the U.S. who are involved in this hobby in one way or another to give me their opinions on this, because I didn't want to just say my own case is indicative of, you know, what's going on in the U.S. I don't want to speak for all American gamers or writers or whatever. So I talked to a couple of retailers. I talked to 3 who are writers and publishers like me. I talked to 2 bloggers, people involved in hobby media. And I talked to 2 people who are producing figures or gaming accessories in the U.S., right? So a total of 9. Of those 9, only 1 believed that there was any growth in the sales of historically themed gaming products. He's a retailer. His sales are up over last year, although last year was a bad year for him. So in some ways, it's sort of coming back to where he wants them to be.
Yeah.
Everybody else said that, well, the best that they could offer was it's stagnant.
Yeah.
No one except this one person has seen any growth. And by growth, I mean new American customers, you know, a growth in the number of American gamers or people who are writing, doing media, producing, designing, or selling. I want to be clear. I mean, fantasy and sci-fi are doing fine over here. I think everyone I talked to agreed on that. The majority of fantasy and sci-fi games that Americans play are designed overseas, however. I mean, Fantasy Flight is a notable exception, obviously. But if you walk into an American gaming store, most of what you see on the shelves is fantasy and sci-fi and produced not in the U.S. And historical gaming, it is not in the best of health.
But interestingly, certainly one of the things I saw over there is there seems to be a lot more sort of niche market historical rules over there.
For example?
Thinking of, for example, On to Richmond, Ultra Freedom, stacks of ACW rules. I mean, that's probably a very American-specific thing, I guess. But
On to Richmond is about 30 years old.
Oh, yeah. But still quite popular.
Yeah. Ultra Freedom came out recently. I know those guys. They contacted me, actually, but that's in the last 5 years or so. I don't know anything about their sales figures, but it's, I don't think it's in any way competitive with something that, you might see coming out of New Zealand or Britain right now.
I did think the vibe I got from looking around Historical's dealer room, quite a lot of perhaps small press will be a kind of description. Historical rules?
Yeah. it's hard to generalize about this. I want to say a couple of caveats first, because I don't want to get in the position where I make these generalized statements that anyone can find an exception to and therefore disprove. But
we'll let you if it fills our mailbag.
Well, there's a dearth of hard data, obviously, right? I mean, nobody has sat down with everybody in this business and tallied their sales figures over a 10-year period and made a chart or whatever and kind of graphed it out. It's also very hard to say who's, quote, in the business, unquote, right? I mean, if you're talking about something like a small press, I mean, if a company makes board games but also some dice, and then, are they part of the same group of businesses that publish rules or figure casting and so on? It's hard to say who's out of the business. I mean, I know people who haven't published in years, but are probably considered by most gamers to still be active because those gamers still play those old rules. So what we have to go on is pretty sketchy stuff. I mean, we have what's on the shelf in brick and mortar stores. And that is always tougher in America because the customers are so spread out. Right, people have to drive considerable distance to find a brick and mortar game store in most parts of this country. I'm lucky I live in a very densely populated area, but for most Americans, it's different. There is no U.S.-based glossy hobby magazine of the historical genre. I don't even know how many there are in fantasy genre. There is some web-based media in the U.S. that's successful, including an old friend of mine. But, of course, anything on the web is not really national in the sense of serving one region or clientele. And in many cases, they're reviewing and promoting products that are made overseas. Everyone knows the most successful hobby publishers are not in the U.S. at the moment, haven't been for a long time. We'll talk about Historicon and things like that shortly, because I know you went recently. You've been more recently than I have. But who are the major new innovators in the U.S. doing historical tabletop games? I mean, a couple of years ago, somebody praised me online as being part of a younger generation of game designers. Well, guys, I'm 50. If 50 is the younger generation or up and coming, I mean, that's sort of like the old Soviet leaders on the Kremlin wall at the May Day parade, right? I mean, waving at the tanks passing by below. 25 years ago, I think it would have been easy to dismiss all of these statements. There were U.S.-based hobby magazines. There were games written by Americans that sold in the tens of thousands of copies. Many of the most prominent names in the hobby were Americans, people like Frank Chadwick, Artie Conliffe, Scott Bowden, Rich Hasenhauer. Up-and-coming, exciting new miniatures company was Old Glory. Remember that? But you have to go back to the early 1990s to find a period when Americans were dominant in the historical tabletop gaming hobby.
It's quite unusual. I mean, when you look at the size of America, I was thinking about this from the mail. I was sort of working out manufacturers, and so we got Old Glory, which has been around for, since the year dot. Then there's GHQ. They're American. I couldn't really think of anybody else. I mean, I know that my mate Bill has moved over to America, so Footasaw is now producing over there. But I really couldn't think of anybody else who was producing. I mean, Architects of War recently went under.
Right. They were primarily a retailer.
I was going to say they did get into miniature manufacturing and games manufacturing.
Yep.
And ran a disastrous Kickstarter, which basically ruined them. But I couldn't think of anybody else. I mean, board games. Obviously, you got Fantasy Flight, which is massive.
Board games are doing better, and the U.S. has always been a good board game market. But I do some people in that business as well, and they have been saved by crowdfunding. I mean, they were doing crowdfunding before there was a Kickstarter. There are many American board game companies that had like the 500 Club or the 300 Club, where people pledged that number of purchases. It was sort of an internal Kickstarter kind of thing.
Yeah, like GMT do that as well. Again, which is another American board game company. But yeah, it's quite strange that we've got this. We've got an awful lot of war games manufacturers and companies here in the UK, and there's not so many in America. And I was trying to work out why that is, and the only thing I could come up with is the Games Workshop effect. Because if you look at the big players now in the UK, Warlord, Mantic, for two, Nick and North Star, who's moving into figure manufacturing and is a huge distributor. Companies like Great Escape Games, Encounter Heresy in there as well. Even small ones like Second Combat, they all come from working in Games Workshop. And the Perrys, another company.
Yeah, two of the people I talked to on that list of 9 people mentioned that specifically as a sort of structural advantage that, well, there's two things they mentioned. One is that they thought that a number of people in the hobby in Britain were in some way or another in the past connected with Games Workshop and kind of cut their teeth in the industry on that. But also just the smaller size of Britain and the sort of higher density of gamers makes it easier for someone to promote products. Someone can come by around you and have a chat, where you and I talk maybe, once every 2 years or something. We're just separated by an ocean. And you can meet people at all these different shows and promote in a way that reaches more people more quickly.
Yeah, that is true. Because, we have shows here in the UK pretty much weekly, don't we? Mike, you know more about this from doing Hereward, trying to fit a new show in.
Yeah, about to say, from trying to actually find a date for Hereward, before we found the one that Partisan vacated, it's literally, I'm talking to Ruben, who's our trade manager, who is, out being PE2 collectibles most of the year. And I tend to assume he's not around at weekends because he's at some show or other somewhere. And the other thing about British shows is relatively, we're all pretty close together compared to, we had this discussion, I think, when we were discussing the difference between US clubs and UK clubs. And I'm sure it applies just as much to US shows and UK shows, in that if your show is name enough to pull in the, if you like, the big boys or the popular boys. We got 29 traders without having to actually rope in more than one or two that I would categorize as box shifters. Every single one was a manufacturer with, you'll attest to that, won't you, Neil?
Yeah, well, very much so.
Every trader we had was producing their own range of figures or rules or something.
I think it's pretty much it's getting to the point where, there is a show on in the UK. It's certainly every other week. Obviously, basically, the 2 or 3 weeks around Christmas are fairly quiet. But other than that, definitely every other week. Sometimes every week, and sometimes 2 different ones on the same weekend.
There were 2 last weekend.
Well, quite, yeah. So whether or not the wargame show scene in the UK is vibrant and growing even more. There's another new show starting. Funny enough, in Nottingham in February next year, that whole thing, and the fact that you see people a lot and you can network an awful lot between people at the same time. You get an awful lot of interaction with the movers and shooters in the hobby because they make themselves available, and that there is very easy access. Whether or not that has something to do with it,
it's easier for them to make themselves available, right? There's a war game show in California. Should I spend $600 on a plane ticket and fly out to California and hope to attract some attention? Obviously, there's a point at which I have to, even driving down to a Storicon. If I stay in a hotel, that's going to, several $100s. I have to ask myself, did I earn that back? Was it a reasonable thing for a guy like me to do? I'm not a retailer, obviously, so I'm not down there to move lots of products. But it's not, even if I were around, I don't know, I'd think twice about doing it. I used to do it religiously every year, and I don't really think I saw a whole lot of return on it.
Yeah, it's an entirely different thing, though. It's all to do with the scale over there, isn't it? Here you can pretty safely say that no trader who came, I would hope, that no trader who came to, say, Hereward or Partisan left poorer than they arrived, allowing for expensive. I would dread to, if you did the kind of show schedule that, say, Colonel Bills do over here, you'd be bankrupt.
Yeah. There's also the question of stagnant numbers at best, right? The Historicon attendance is down significantly from 10 years ago. There are some smaller regional conventions that have shown some growth, but there's a kind of point at which they don't have the money or numbers or media presence to attract a large selection of dealers. And obviously, dealers care about the bottom line. If they have one customer who spends $1,000, that's going to be easier than 1,000 customers who each spend $1. So it's hard to analyze that sort of thing, but the more people that they can put themselves in the midst of, obviously, the more chance they have of attracting, new customers, which is what they want to do to grow the business. And that's, the numbers are just not there from the large conventions. At best, they're holding steady.
All right, does this feed into a bigger question? And it's one that I know that me and Neil have discussed this, which is the way that the hobby in itself is changing. And maybe in America, you're just seeing it in another way. There is definitely a shift away from historical games into obviously the sci-fi fantasy, but also the quick play, skirmish, company-led, figure-led games where people can buy into a product, a product made by a company. Warlords doing it for bolt action is a great example. It's almost like the bolt action hobby now instead of a World War II game. And it's that sort of moving away from what we would call an historical game.
But you have to ask yourself, the companies who have done that elsewhere other than the U.S. and been successful, like Warlord, for instance, or Battlefront or whatever, what is lacking in the U.S.? Why isn't there some American equivalent of that? Right? There's no reason there shouldn't be. There's no shortage of innovation, of money, or whatever, people who could do it. Why hasn't it come together in that way? And I don't have an answer for that. I just know that it hasn't. That the opposite seems to be happening. That American gamers, by and large, are driven by products coming from outside the U.S.
Yeah, are they typically driven by products that have taken off outside the US before they make it over there?
Yeah,
I'm wondering if one of the things that, for example, with Flames of War, is once you get it to hit critical mass in somewhere small, like the UK or New Zealand, it becomes much easier for a sufficiently large group of people in the States to take it on for it to hit critical mass there.
Yeah, I don't know enough about. I know several of those guys who either do or have worked for that company, and I'm not going to sort of try to interrogate them on the business history of it, but I do know that the initial growth of Flames of War in the U.S. was dramatic. It really took off very suddenly and was in every brick and mortar shop, and to a certain degree still is. But it didn't result in any American copycats. It didn't result in any American people in the hobby saying, well, we could do something like this, and creating their own domestic version of it.
That's interesting because we have seen similar things over here.
But the thing is, to get it in quote every for reasonably large values of every brick and mortar store in the US, you need a big US distributor with clout, and I think to get that you have to have the product and a proven track record first. And I have a suspicion that's quite hard to get if you start out as the size that Battlefront probably were when they started, in a market the size of the US.
Well, we have cities in this country that have more people than New Zealand, right? There's no reason why that we couldn't have the critical mass of people that if there was some initiative, if someone had the money or the innovation or the ability to do it, there's no reason why it couldn't have happened. There's also we're sort of dancing around another issue. People like to argue about the generational aspect of this, but I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that historical gaming sort of has an age bubble in this country. When I was young and I went to Historicon, the average age seemed to be about 30 to 35. Today, it looks more like 55 to 60. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of people have just walked away. But of those who have stayed, there's what looks like an age bubble. And existing organizations and clubs tend to be conservative here or resistant or actually hostile to change. I witnessed the guys who won't play anything with cards. So they're shrinking, and that's reflected in the industry. And one of the guys, you may know, he told me I could quote him on this. His name is Luke Melia. He's an old friend of mine. He's one of the people in the WWPD podcast, What Would Patton Do? Mm-hmm. And I'm quoting him now. He says, I cannot think of a U.S.-based historical game company of any note. Everything is driven from overseas, to my knowledge, unquote. So to the extent that new ideas reach these shores, they tend to be fantasy sci-fi, which is a more receptive audience. And again, I can't prove this. I don't have data, but it seems to be that the historical gamers are comfortable with what they've got and are just sort of sticking to it. And as a result, at best, they're stagnant as a market.
Okay, now this is a potentially inflammatory question, but do you think that part of the issue with the whole thing around historical gaming is a cultural one? Yeah, let's face it. And in some ways it works the other way. You know, for example, you know, American Civil War is as far as historical gaming is concerned, very popular. I understand anecdotally, and from what Mr. Whitaker said, that's very popular in the States. Not quite so popular in Europe. However, you know, an awful lot of what you look at as far as accepted historical war games, you know, and you know, the big wars that they represent. Yeah, you look at, you know, whether it's Napoleonics, Ancients, World War II, an awful lot of it took place in Europe.
Yeah, but hold on a second. I mean, for two things with that. First of all, I sold more copies of Longstreet in Australia than I sold in America.
Right. Okay.
So now that could just be me. Okay. Again, I don't want to generalize and say that my experience is, you know, is universal or speaks for all American gamers, but it surprised me, but there was more interest for an American Civil War game outside the U.S. than there was in. And if we just look at my American sales of that game versus my non-American sales outnumbered American sales 4-1 or more.
Oh, right. Okay.
As for the Americans being less inclined to be interested in European wars, I don't think that explains it either, because you just go back 20-25 years and you've got, you know, Napoleon's Battles, for instance, done by Taylor and Coggins and published by Avalon Hill. That thing sold almost 30,000 copies. There is no American game, historical game, that will ever sell that many copies again. Not even close. The Empire series by Scott Bowden. At one point he was selling 20,000 copies of Empire. There's not an American to be found between those covers of those books. There were Napoleonics games, but they used to be big. Where is it gone now? I don't have an answer for that. My best-selling game ever was also a Napoleonics game, and I have to look at the numbers, but it's less than 6,000 copies. So I'm small potatoes. But that probably makes me one of the more successful American publishers still around. I don't know, but I can't think of a whole lot of other American games that are doing that. And yet compare me to something like, you know, Battlefront or Warlord or whatever, and I'm a speck.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to your point about the bubble, I would say that there is a similar bubble over here with historical gamers being of a certain age, probably a little bit less than what you're saying, probably 40 plus, I would say, for the majority of historical gamers. Mm. You know, I went to, I was a Firestorm and they had a Flames of War tournament there. Pretty much everybody I looked around and saw were all 40 plus in the 50s. But I think what might be the difference is maybe over here we're a little bit more open to new mechanics, new rules, than maybe what you were saying about what happens over in America. Or, you know, maybe we're just happy to try out new mechanics.
How much like the club environment, though, because we are more prone to having, you know, per previous discussions on this podcast, we have more clubs. And therefore, we have more people waltzing in going, look what I've found. Anybody fancy trying this? Whereas clubs in the States or games in the States do tend to be the close-knit group of the same people with very little new blood who sit there and play the rules that they've loved for God knows how long.
Right, and don't forget how spread apart Americans are geographically too. You know, and the fact that we tend to have much larger houses than Brits do. It means that you're more likely to find a guy who's got space in his basement or his garage or wherever he can set up a table, and then his friends will congregate at his house. And that instead of a club environment, you've got one guy deciding, I think next Saturday I'll host a game, and I'll invite my friends. And that means that, you know, it's not in an environment usually where there's going to be a lot of contact with new products or new people. It's going to be him and his friends and their favorite game. I hope that no one listening to this thinks that I'm criticizing any of this. I'm not. I'm trying to understand why what used to be a really vibrant and innovative sector of this hobby business is not anymore. It can't all be explained by age bubbles. You know, it can't all be explained by geography or people living spread out. There's obviously some sort of combination of factors, and I don't have a good answer for it.
You know, tabletop gaming as a whole, okay, and now the evidence you may have it may only well be anecdotal on this, but so would you suggest that tabletop gaming as a whole is struggling in the States? Or do you simply see it as actually it's more the historical side of the hobby that's struggling in the States?
Yeah, I think it'd have to be the latter. Most of the hobby stores that I'm familiar with, I can think of only one hobby store that carries any large number of historical figures. And they tend to do so as part of some larger franchise like Flames of War or Bolt Action, both of which are from overseas, right?
Yeah.
Most U.S. stores pay the bills with things like Magic cards, for instance, or Games Workshop. And then, you know, the young kids who come in to play that. They play, you know, fantasy or sci-fi or card games. Our club, which has been shrinking also, which was once twice or more the size it is now, rents. We don't really rent. We don't pay them anything, but we sort of reserve in advance a Saturday once a month at this hobby store in a nearby town. And, you know, we are old enough to be the fathers of most of the guys, you know, who are in the store, who outnumber us 5-1 and who are playing Magic the Gathering or playing Warhammer or a 40K or something like that. So the store kind of tolerates us as a kind of quaint, you know, cluster of old graybeards.
It can be similar here. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
You walk into Firestorm on a Saturday, and it's a similar thing. You know, there'll be a few of us playing either an assault game or a board game. Everybody else is there playing lots of card games, lots of board games, lots of small-scale skirmish games, fantasy-based ones.
If we define all of the aforementioned as tabletop, then the answer to Neil's question is no. You know, tabletop games are doing fine. It's just that there's less and less interest, at least over here, I think, in historical tabletop games.
I was going to say, do you think the competition side of things has an impact? Because from what I hear from listening to a few other American-based podcasts, is they're always talking about what competition they're going to go to. They're going to go to this comp, or this comp. They're going to get their army ready for this comp. So it seems to be a very big competition-based event seen over in America, but there are certain rules which lend themselves to competition play, which tend to be, you know, your fantasy, your sci-fi, games like Bolt Action do it quite well.
Flames of War. Although Flames of War seems to be dropping off in this country. Yeah,
I was going to say that, Mike. Yeah, you're right there. You know,
well, sustaining for the manufacturer to sustain that in America requires a lot of expense accounts, I would imagine, for gasoline and, you know, mileage and so on, because, you know, the traveling to have the kind of full or part-time staff you would need to organize and support that and promote it requires people moving around a lot, because you're going to have one competition in Minneapolis and another one in Philadelphia, and, you know, there's a day and a half between those two cities in a car.
A lot of trusted local volunteers.
Yeah.
That's what it tends to be. Is you have your local groups who organise their competitions and then just invite everybody. Similar over here, you get very few companies who actually turn up to run competitions for their products.
But they will mostly, I mean, Mantic being a classic example, whatever you might think of their prize support for their competitions, it's perfectly possible for a tournament organiser to write off to Mantic and get a prize pack for their Dreadball or whatever competition. I've heard less than flattering opinions of said prize packs, but they are at least there. And I know the same is or was true for the likes of Flames of War and Bolt Action.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, as I said at the outset, I don't think there's any question that fantasy and sci-fi are healthy over on this side of the Atlantic. But for a guy like me who primarily does historical games and is, you know, looking at the future, I don't see... I'm really sort of trying to recalibrate my business model with, given what's happening in shipping and postage, for a future in which very few of my customers might be American.
It's interesting how Australia is seems to have been changing because there seems to be quite a boom happening in Australia. There's people out there writing nice sets of rules. We got manufacturers like Eureka over there. Obviously, Flames of War happened in New Zealand, which is kind of Australia, but
Oh,
you. Okay, dear listeners,
okay, that's Mike Hobbs.
Is...
Yes.
That's right. I grew up in Virginia, which is really sort of Bermuda.
Yeah, it's another thing, yeah. But, again, Australia is a country with a population that is spread out, similar to America. Large pockets of, the cities are quite dense, similar to America. But that seems to be on moving up, with having people producing stuff. Whereas what you're saying, Sam, is in America, it's stagnant. And I wonder what's the difference between the two.
Well, again, I'm trying to take a long-term view of this. It's not just stagnant, right? I mean, if you go back 25 years, there were American hobby magazines, right? They don't exist anymore. If you go back 25 years, there were American historical games that sold upwards of 10 and 20,000 copies. They don't exist anymore. Given the growth of the American population, the fact that at best convention attendance is holding steady means that every year we are a smaller and smaller slice of the population proportionately, right? I mean, if Historicon, it's a good day when, it's a good Historicon when they get 2,500, 2,700 visitors. Well, it used to be more than that. Some people argue, well, some of them have gone to other cons, and that might be true. But even so, if it were still holding steady, that means we're shrinking vis-a-vis the larger population. And there's a sort of vicious circle here, because if you have fewer people producing stuff, there's less reason for someone like you, for instance, to focus on an American figure in the hobby and help them by, introducing them to a new audience. Why would you? They're already sort of in this backwater of the hobby. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm worried that really where a lot of wargame innovation used to happen, we're just not seeing it anymore.
That's a big. I mean, interestingly, as you say, is it, and something, Mike, that you brought up earlier, is that simply a case of what Sam is experiencing is something that is actually happening not just in the US, but it's actually a hobby-wide issue that that just hasn't impacted Europe in the same way just yet. I had a conversation at the weekend about the infamous comment of the greying of the hobby, and obviously we've talked about age bubbles and stuff. Because on the flip side of that, there is also this other thing about the fact that, and especially when it comes down to historical games. Now, okay, when you talk about bolt action and what have you, the armies have got smaller, but as a general rule, historical games tend to require fairly large armies. Now, obviously, you can say exactly the same of of sci-fi and fantasy. And let's face it, an awful lot of the manufacturers are there to sell models. The rules are there as a vehicle to sell models. So yes, lots of people have big sci-fi and fantasy armies. At the same time, if you're looking at that from an historical point of view, you need a certain amount of disposable income in order to purchase those miniatures. And there definitely seems to be the fact that, okay, there is an age, like when you're younger, when you don't have the responsibilities, and because, maybe you're living at home or what have you, but you don't have the financial responsibility. So
you also don't necessarily have the money.
Well, quite, yeah. But I mean, there is an offset there, So, but you potentially have more disposable income. Then, obviously, you hit that thing of maybe leaving home, starting, making your own home and stuff. Maybe relationships and families and various other bits and pieces, where your disposable income shrinks massively, and then hopefully, when you start getting a bit older, your disposable income grows again, and once again, you can then afford, effectively, to get back into the hobby.
And
now, is that a factor?
Well, I mean, to finish that thought, presumably you then retire and have more time as well.
Presumably, yeah. So maybe, again, maybe that's just part of a natural cycle. And maybe we're just, is it just a case of we're just noticing it because we're naturally growing older in that cycle anyway, and it was something that we didn't really take notice of when we were gaming 10, 15 years ago?
Well, when I was gaming 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I did notice that if you walk around a game convention, the average color of hair was brown. Whereas now if I walk around a game convention, the average color of hair is gray or white. I hear what you're saying. So I don't know. I mean, again, I don't have data on this. I don't think anyone does. In any event, it wouldn't explain at a time now when we can move information and products around the world much, much more easily than we could before. It wouldn't explain why, new American companies weren't starting up that were catching fire, with customers in Italy and Britain and New Zealand and wherever, regardless of age bubbles.
Indeed.
Maybe it's just something as simple as logistics. Because we got so many game companies over here in the UK, it's fairly easy for somebody to go in, work in a game company, learn how to make molds, learn how to cast with metal or cast with resin. If there's nobody in your immediate area who's doing that, it's difficult to learn those skills. And if you haven't got those skills, you're not going to start your own company. Basically trying to do manufacturing on something you know nothing about.
Right.
Maybe that has an impact. So maybe there's a lot of guys out there, with some fantastic ideas, but haven't got the skills to actually produce that product.
One thing that I think we probably all agree on is that the internet age was supposed to liberate the little guy, right? I mean, anybody could sell PDFs or print-on-demand game products. But what happened, of course, was that it strengthened the big guys, right? They can promote their products more easily. They can dominate the market better because the economy of scale favors them for both printing and in shipping. And they, as crowdfunding was introduced, they then dominated that as well. So, places that had established industry and were quick to jump on new technologies benefited. And maybe what happened was that Americans in the business just didn't jump on that new technology in the way that others did. I'm guessing here. I know that may be complete rubbish. I don't know.
I mean, certainly it's something that we'd encourage listeners to get in contact with us about, because obviously you're the guys out there on the ground, much more so than us sat in our various parts of the world surmising from what we can see. And obviously, we're taking quite a small, quite a small sample of opinion here. So it would be really interesting to find out from you, the listener, what your own perceptions are and what your thoughts are on this subject. Is it going to be a case of 10 years' time we have, or even, okay, let's move it forward. Are we likely to see in 20 years' time maybe almost no historical gaming happening at all? Is that just kind of looking at the way things are going, is that going to be a natural progression? Because obviously you're going to hit a critical mass point somewhere along the line where either your existing customer base, cease to be simply because of age, or you get to that critical mass where there aren't enough people around to sustain a product anyway.
Don't think so. I'll tell you why. Sitting here as chairman of a club, the most common path I see people follow in our club is they turn up playing War Machine or 40k or something else that's fantasy or sci-fi, and within 6 months to a year, it's, can I join in on one of your historical games?
Yeah, one of the 9 people I talked to said more or less exactly that he had seen that sort of cross-pollination happening. And again, I have no numbers for anything like that, but from an American point of view, I wanted to ask, what game are we talking about here? Is it a game that was that a game that was made in the U.S.? Is it by an American author? Is it sold by an American distributor, or is it something that was coming from overseas?
What we tend to find is we draw in people via bolt action, or sometimes one of our members runs big games of Black Powder. I occasionally run Chain of Command, I Ain't Been Shot Mum. People run WAB, War and Conquest. So it does
all
appear
British games.
They're all British games.
Yeah.
So, but you do find bolt action does seem to be, and tanks now does seem to be a very common path in from I only play War Machine, or I only play 40k, or I only play Dreadball, to getting people to play historical. And from then on in, we have such a diversity of historical games that get played down the club that you'll see people pulled in playing those who wouldn't otherwise have done so.
Yeah, I think historical games aren't going to go anywhere soon, but I think the style of historical games will change. And
the fact that Mantic have just announced Kings of War historical isn't going to hurt.
Yeah, but yeah, I think historical games will go more down the abstracted route, a la bolt action, where, let's be honest, Flames of War, bolt action could be described as games that just take place in World War II and not World War II war games.
Gentle listener, please note that for once it wasn't me who said that.
Well, I mean, look, this is a whole other, 2-hour conversation. Yeah, I mean, as the resident historian in our little circle here, I just want to say that I don't have any issue with games that are set in history. My historical work is one thing; it's a whole different animal. It's a completely different methodology, and then I design games that are set in history, and they give a nod to certain historical things in order to be satisfying, in the same way that a good historical movie is not going to be anyone's basis for a research project, but it'll give you that satisfaction of, the period piece and the costumes, and hopefully doesn't get anything big wrong.
Yes, but I have found that since I got back into the hobby in about 2010 or so. Mm-hmm. Having had the usual midlife break to get married and discover rock and roll and things like that, I found that one of the things that happens with historical games I really get into is I wind up doing the background research. My library of things on the landscape of Anglo-Saxon Britain is entirely the fault of Dux Britanniarum, for instance.
But I think what Sam was saying is right, is for a country the size of America, the amount of output, whether that's figures, rules, or anything else with a hobby, it is tiny.
It is surprising, considering it is such a manufacturing powerhouse in other areas. It is really surprising, isn't it? The fact, as you say, just sheer number of population.
Well, I just want to keep this in context also, that 25 years ago it was a very different story. Right, that it was not a tiny output 25 years ago, quite the contrary.
Yeah,
because when you look at it, Games Workshop came from selling rules which were written in America. Yeah, we're not talking about a country that hasn't discovered the hobby yet. We're talking about a country that has sort of walked away from it.
True. I keep being very surprised. I mean, I went to Historicon with an intent of picking up some 15mm sci-fi stuff, to discover while I was browsing the catalogue that the company I thought was American was British. And it happened more than once. So I do see your point. I'm at a loss to explain it.
It will be interesting, Neil, to see how much feedback you get from American listeners. I don't know if you have any sense for how many American listeners you do have.
Something around about a third of our downloads go to America, but give me 1 second. I will.
I foresee an all mailbag episode coming up sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Whilst Neil is looking that up, you do have one American fan who has sent me a tweet going, ooh, tell him I said hi. And that's from the Cranky Lawyer, whose name I don't know. But
I don't either.
But he's a lovely bloke. He's somewhere in America who just buys everything. I think he keeps Annie pretty much in business. I think he's over on the East Coast somewhere. And we chat all the time about stuff. But I don't actually know his name.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
He constantly blames us for the reason that he keeps buying stuff, but then you got to look at what he's buying and kind of thinking, I'm sure we're not responsible for everything. So, Sam, he answered your question about distribution of listenership and whether that relates or so. Okay, so we've just clocked over 670,000 downloads on the podcast. Okay,
Yes.
of that, 285,000 are American, and that beats the UK by 130,000.
This is the total number of downloads. So if I downloaded twice, it would count me as 2. Is that right?
That is possibly the case.
Do we have a
number of
unique
downloads?
visitor count?
On the downloads, I don't think we do. We certainly have on the podcast. We certainly have on the website.
The one on the website is probably representative.
Well, yeah, it's probably at least it shows that there's
but then again,
a lot of Americans who listen to your show.
Yeah, but then again, also the other thing is that possibly that again points a little bit at how people consume their hobby media, which is another subject entirely. So yeah, looking at the blog, thank you, Mr. Whitaker. We're probably looking again. UK and the United States are our top of number of visitors, but funny enough, it's flipped the other way around. So this year, for example, okay, again, actually this is looking at page views as opposed to visitors. Average is about 2.5 page views per person at the moment. 72, just under 73,000 from the UK, just under 45,000 from the US. So we're still getting a very high percentage of US people following, this hobby blog, just as a case in point. But obviously, again, this is a blog that covers the whole spectrum. It isn't just wargaming. It isn't just historical wargaming. I know we talk about historical wargaming a lot, and and sci-fi and fantasy is a much smaller part of our output. But yeah, we're still getting fairly healthy visitor numbers from the States. So yeah, again, I suppose what that says is that yes, we get an awful lot of American listeners. So it will be interesting to have their input into this conversation, and to see what they think, and also interestingly enough, what they play and what they consume.
Yeah, definitely.
And their thoughts on the whole thing. So it will be really, really interesting to have a comeback on that from
There's
people.
Your challenge, folks. Help Sam understand the world.
And also, if you are American, start writing some rules and manufacturing some figures, please. Come on, let's see what you can do.
On that note, and that note of challenge, maybe it's time we brought this conversation to a close and let Sam get away. Because after all, he's been chatting to us for a while, and I'm sure, actually, given the time in the States, he wants to go home and have some dinner.
Well, get away in the sense that I probably made about 8,000 new enemies now, and I need to fortify my home.
Don't worry, Sam, you got a lot of friends over here in Europe.
Indeed. Well, Sam, again, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat, mate. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you so much for the invitation. I love it.
We really appreciate you coming on the show and taking the time out of your day. So thank you so much for talking to us.
My pleasure.
And as I say, you now having whetted our appetites about Rumble. So what we need to do is for you now to convince Mr. Hobbs that he needs to be a playtester.
Go on, Hobbsy. It makes sense.
And not be quite so stringent on the non-disclosure agreement. So at least he can tell us about it.
Sorry, but playtesting rules take precedent. I'm sorry, Neil. You know this.
I do. Rommel sounds really interesting. So really looking forward to that, Sam. That sounds really interesting, mate.
Yeah, next time we talk, I hope to have the beastie in hand.
We'll just book you in for a regular September visit.
All right.
Putting it in your diary for next year, week after coming back from Germany. Put us in for a slot.
And we'll have another long and wide-ranging discussion on bits of the hobby that none of us understand.
And of course, hopefully by then you'll potentially also have the book out as well.
I refuse to put a date on this. I know it'll be next year, but beyond that, I can't predict yet.
Well, again, thank you very much, and all the very best with the writing and with the playtesting, and we look forward to catching up with you very soon.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, Sam.
Bye.
So here we are, at the end of another show. Another show where Dave has sat in the corner and said almost nothing for a while.
No, actually, to be fair, Dave has sat in the corner and gone, "What did I do, Neil?"
Well, yeah. The problem is I haven't done very much, have I? It's pretty sickening, really.
We shall have.
It's a good job you have a social secretary, isn't it, mate?
Yeah.
We shall have to rectify that. What are we playing tomorrow, mate? Come on, make a decision. What are we going to do? What do you reckon?
I don't know. What was on the offing?
What's on the offing? Well,
you did text me today.
I did.
Too busy though.
Well, see, this is he doesn't call, he doesn't write, he doesn't read his texts. What's a man to do?
Oy vey.
You can always go back to your chain of command campaign and maybe just do a little test game to remind yourself of the rules.
Yes, how do you play this game? I think it was. It all depends on how knackered Dave is after a day's work, and whether we can engage brain.
I'm assuming this is a slightly unpredictable and variable quantity depending on the day.
Yes. So at the moment, the offering is if he's non-compos mentis, we are going to be playing some sort of Command and Colours variant.
Oh yes.
And if he is compos mentis, then there's a good possibility we are going to be either reminding ourselves about Sword and Spear or playing a test game of Blucher.
Oh yeah, Blucher. Yeah.
I tell you what you could do.
Yeah.
You could put your stickers on the other half of your Command and Colours blocks.
Why would you want to do that?
Lightweight.
It's more practicality.
You don't know how long he's been waiting to have a go at you about that.
Speaking of the other game you just mentioned then, and Mr. Mustafa, Hobbsy, Rommel.
Well,
hang on a second. Didn't you just say to Sam that you hadn't got time?
Well,
I did just say that, but by the magic of podcasting, that was a week ago.
By the magic of podcasting and time warps, things have moved on since then, haven't they, Hobbsy?
For research purposes.
What, research purposes which include an NCA, so you can't tell us about it anyway?
Yes. But when that game comes out, I'll be all over it, mate. No, I've had a chat with Sam, and
he has convinced you of the error of your ways.
No, he just laughed and basically went, "I'll send you the rules over. Anybody else interested?" So our little gaming group here in Cardiff.
Oh dear.
We're play session Rommel.
Careful, Mr.
Frailty, thy name is Hobbsy.
Careful, Mr. Whitaker. When I laughed at him on text, he threatened to give my name to Mr. Mustafa as an extra playtester.
Dave would like it. Tell you what, Dave, you'd love it. No micro movement management.
Oh, sounds good.
It's
operational level, mate.
Yeah. Area movement, you got like a grid. You move from grid to grid.
Oh, yes. Sounds good already.
Yeah. Can't tell it anymore. And I think I can only tell that because Sam did say
I
that.
was going to say, the reason you can say that is because that's what we already know.
If the gentle listener were to rewind about half an hour.
Yes.
What?
Actually, no, maybe about an hour.
Yeah.
And the rest.
Yeah.
Oh, we should wrap this up.
Yeah.
We should, because we yes, this has gone on.
It's not going to be short.
Yeah, I've got work tomorrow.
I'm in London tomorrow.
And on that note, indeed, we shall call it a night, call it a day for this time round. Once again, congratulations if you stay with us this long. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, well, first off, thank you for joining us to Mr. Dave Luff.
Yeah.
Despite the best efforts of his computer.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, conquer the technology, got there in the end. It's nice to hear from you, if only for a few minutes, mate.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you to Mr. Hobbs. Yes, the Welsh Wizard, as always, and now also
Welsh Wizard.
Shut up, Dave.
Cat Whisperer. It's a Cat Whisperer, aren't you?
Cat Whisperer. Yes.
Cat Whisperer, or was it Cat Wrestler? One or the other.
Cat separator at the moment.
And I suppose I should say thank you to the Phantom Cake Napper.
Oh, that reminds me. There's a piece left up.
I haven't forgotten. Just because it's been a couple of hours since we last mentioned it, or maybe not actually, but just because it's been a while since we mentioned Cake Gate.
Oh, and Mike, thanks for sending me that slice over in the post. It was good.
Was that by UPS?
Yeah.
It hasn't got there yet.
And it was a bit hard in the middle. I think there was like some sort of figure pressed into it.
Until next time, happy gaming. And we'll catch up with you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Where'd the babies come from?
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media, and here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.